You're already halfway down the tunnel before you realize how quiet it is. One hand on the wall, fingers tracing rough, damp stone. You feel the castle above you only as a dull weight. The air is cool, a little earthy, and somewhere far ahead the darkness smells like sugar. Not metaphorical sugar. Actual honeyduke sugar, all caramel and chocolate and that weird fizzy sherbet that feels like it's trying to electrocute your tongue. Your footsteps are soft, your breathing sounds too loud, and the thrill sitting in your chest. That is the very specific feeling of being completely unseen under Hogwarts. No Filch, no portraits, no suits of armor judging your life choices, just you, the tunnel, and the promise of a cellar full of contraband sweets. Yeah, take a moment, because if you've been paying attention, this exact stretch of stone once carried three freezing, terrified teenagers sneaking into Hogsmeade without permission, while a mass murderer godfather and a homicidal rat, Animagus, ran around the countryside. Later, the same network of passages helped move students, supplies, and the occasional illegal dragon egg during a war. These were survival routes, lifelines. Now, post Voldemort, post Battle of Hogwarts, the war torn castle you remember from Deathly Hallows has settled. The rubble's cleared, the walls are mended, and the secret tunnels didn't get sealed up. They got repurposed. The Honeyduke's passage is a midnight sweets run. The room of requirements exits are for smuggling snacks and love letters, not fugitives. The Wumping Willow passage that once hid a monster and a boy's monthly agony? It's a whispered dare, a ghost story, and a place Lupin's old students pause by when they miss him. For now, let's celebrate that the wizarding world finally gets to use its secret doors for something other than trauma. So what are we actually doing here? Let's start with the promise. This is your calm, slightly unhinged walking tour of every hidden way in and out of Hogwarts we can reasonably map. We're talking canon-confirmed passages, strongly implied shortcuts, the ones on the Marauders map, and the ones the fandom has basically adopted by common law, where each one starts, where it ends, who used it, when and for what ridiculous purpose. If you're wondering, yes, we're absolutely going to talk about the Marauders map and its 7 labeled ways out of the castle, including this very tunnel from the one-eyed witch statue to the Honeyduke's cellar. We'll get to that later, right after we drag the founders a little for building a school with more escape routes than safety regulations. We're going to walk with a lonely Remus Lupin down the passage to the Shrieking Shack, when it was less shortcut and more monthly exile. We'll follow Neville and the DA as the Room of Requirement quietly grows a living maze of exits to the Hog's Head, so they can eat, plot, and not die during the Caro era. And we'll look at what happens after the war when new generations turn old escape routes into comfort rituals. Midnight cocoa runs, secret birthday parties, and those confession walks where two people go in as friends and come out very much not just friends. So keep your hand on the wall, keep walking toward that sugar, and don't worry about getting lost. Hogwarts has more secret passages than it admits, and tonight we're opening every single one. And if you're walking those corridors thinking, okay, but how did anyone even find all this? This is where our chaos engineers enter with their cursed little blueprint, the Marauder's map. Let's start with what it actually is. On the surface, it's just an old bit of parchment that insults you if you don't know the password. Classic Hogwarts customer service. But once you whisper, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," the castle unfolds in ink. Every floor, every classroom, every courtyard, every moving staircase, and most unhinged of all, every person walking around in real time, labeled by name. If you're wondering, yes, that means it can outstalk any social media app in the wizarding world. What people forget is that the map doesn't just show people, it quietly shows escape routes. Tiny black corridors veering away from the main castle, little labels like Honeydukes written in cramped script, dotted lines slipping right off the page. While Filch is out here with a filing cabinet of confiscated dung bombs, the Marauders built a live GPS for mischief. Canon-wise, we're told the map lists 7 secret passages leading out of Hogwarts. 7. Yeah, take a moment. The books actually walk us through a few. The one-eyed witch hump that drops you into the Honeyduke's cellar, the Wumping Willow tunnel that ends up at the Shrieking Shack. At least one route Filch knows about and has sealed, because of course he has. But even if you line up every scene, every throwaway line, you're still left with at least 2 routes that are just mysterious dotted lines fandom has been arguing about for years. Look, nobody was surprised that James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter found that many. These are the guys who looked at a full moon and said, "You know what this needs? Animagus paperwork fraud." And yet even they didn't catch everything. The map is powerful, but it's not omniscient. It doesn't show the room of requirements sudden door, or the moving wall shortcuts that only appear when the castle is in a certain mood. We'll get to that later, because those are where Hogwarts stops being a building and starts acting like a chaotic roommate. That's the tension at the heart of all of this. If the marauders, with years of nightly prowling and a literal tracking device, still missed passages, then Hogwarts is basically playing an eternal, unhinged scavenger hunt with every generation of students. The founders carve in the deep bones of the place, the marauders map and weaponize what they can. The trio stumble into others during their yearly accidentally commit treason adventures. The DA, under the Carrows, turned secret exits into lifelines, and after the war, new kids quietly retire some routes and repurpose others for snack runs and late night grief walks. For now, let's celebrate the map as our starting point, our master key that still doesn't fit every lock. Because coming up, we're stepping into the passages the map refuses to admit exist, doors that appear from nowhere, tunnels grown by a room that listens, and one exit so impossible it changes who you think really controls Hogwarts. So, before we crawl into any tunnels, you need a calm mental Hogwarts you can actually walk around in, not the chaotic chase sequence version the films gave you, the slow version, the map in your head version. Let's start with the view from above. Picture the castle clinging to a cliff edge, like it's daring gravity to complain. To one side, the Black Lake, flat and dark, holding merpeople, a giant squid, and way too many exam related tears. Beyond that, the Forbidden Forest, a huge breathing shadow that politely reminds you why detentions with Hagrid are an extreme sport. Stretching out from the main doors, you've got the grounds, the stone bridge, that long path that eventually drops away toward Hogsmeade, like the land itself is sliding off into the village. Now zoom in. Inside the castle, nothing sits still long enough to feel safe. Staircases slide while you're on them. Portraits gossip about where you're going. Some doors only open if you ask nicely. Others pretend to be walls because apparently they're over you and your homework. Trick steps swallow your ankle and hold you there like an embarrassed sacrifice until someone yanks you out. It's funny until you remember. This is security. Hogwarts doesn't bother with metal detectors. It weaponizes confusion. If you're wondering why, think about it. Nosy muggles, bored students, the occasional Dark Lord doing a dramatic hallway strut. The castle's moving architecture is its immune system. You can't invade what you can't reliably navigate. Even Filch doesn't know every route, which, if you've been paying attention, explains why 4 boys with a magical map ate his job description for breakfast. Inside that chaos, not all secret is created equal. You've got soft secrets, the moving staircases, the vanishing step Neville always forgets, the doors that only open if you tickle the right spot or insult them just enough. These are the everyday mischief routes, the ones that turn a walk to charms into a side quest. Then you've got hard secrets, tunnels carved into the rock under the castle, doors hidden behind statues, stone witch humps that open if you know the exact password. Those are built, deliberate, the kind of thing founders, prank geniuses, or deeply stressed werewolf professors arrange. And then there are the living secrets, rooms that grow exits when you're desperate. The room of requirement deciding, during the Caro era, that it will quietly attach itself to the hog's head and become a lifeline. These don't sit on blueprints. They're Hogwarts making choices. Walking through all of this at night, you're not in a building. You're inside a slightly mischievous friend. Sometimes it helps. Stairs line up, portraits warn you about Filch. A door that was locked yesterday sighs and lets you in. Sometimes it absolutely does not. Corridors loop, steps vanish, and the castle basically says, "Go back to bed, you dramatic potato." Yeah, take a moment. For now, let's celebrate that you can feel the layout. Cliff, lake, forest, bridge, village. Inside, a shifting spine of stairs and arteries of stone. Because next, we're slowing down and walking one passage at a time, starting with the most famous chocolate-fueled escape route under the castle. But before we drop into Honeydukes' cellar, the map is still hiding one more problem. What do you do with a secret passage that doesn't want to stay in the same place twice? So, about that problem, a secret passage that doesn't want to stay in the same place twice is already chaos, But the Marauder's map quietly goes one better. It doesn't just show you moving staircases and trick doors. It straight up labels 7 secret passages that lead out of Hogwarts, 7 ways to ditch class, escape Death Eaters, or let's be honest, get sugar. Let's start with the core fact the books actually give us. We only ever walk through 3 of those 7 exits in detail. The Honeyduke's tunnel from the One-Eyed Witch, the passage under the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack, and the Room of Requirement's wartime route to the Hog's Head. That's it. 3 fully guided tours, 4 big question marks, and a whole lot of blank stone in between. On the we actually know what's going on side of the list, things are simple. One passage runs from the hump-backed one-eyed witch statue down to the Honeyduke's cellar, which, if you've been paying attention, is the most Gryffindor solution to a transportation problem ever invented. Another runs from a knot on the Whomping Willow's trunk to the Shrieking Shack, built so Remus Lupin could transform without murdering anyone. And decades later, the Room of Requirement gets dramatic and opens a door straight into the Hog's Head, turning Aberforth's pub into the unofficial arrivals lounge for traumatized teenagers. After that, it gets fuzzy on purpose. The map shows multiple routes heading off toward Hogsmeade Cellars, but we're never told which shops they connect to. Zonko's, the post office, some random wizard's basement full of cursed kettles. We'll get to that later. At least one tunnel is flagged as blocked or caved in by the time Harry sees it, which raises the question, was it destroyed by time, by the founders, or by one very offended caretaker with a shovel and a grudge? And that still leaves us with the true mystery passages. At least 2 of those 7 exits are never described in the books at all. We know they exist because the map literally counts them. We know they lead out of Hogwarts. We do not know where they start, where they end, or who thought any of this was a good idea. It's like the Marauders left us an unfinished scavenger hunt and then peaced out. So here's how we're going to handle it. First, we'll walk slowly through every confirmed, fully described passage one by one. After that, we'll look at implied and era-specific routes, the ones that only appear during the Carrow's reign or only work when the castle wants them to. Finally, we'll imagine post-war Hogwarts quietly repurposing or replacing these tunnels, turning life or death escape routes into, slightly dramatic shortcuts to Hogsmeade weekends. For now, let's celebrate the one passage Harry actually enjoys before everything goes horribly wrong. Next, we're dropping into the Honeyduke's tunnel from his point of view. But with the war long over, the air a little less scared, and the stakes downgraded from illegal to mildly frowned upon midnight snack run. Yeah, take a moment. So, you duck past a suit of armor, pretend you're totally meant to be here after curfew, and there she is, the one-eyed witch. Lumpy, unimpressed, and carved with the exact energy of a teacher who has seen every excuse and believes none of them. She's slumped near the charms corridor, looking like she's about to assign you detention just for existing. Let's start with the entrance, because it's one of the most low-key dramatic moments in the whole castle. You lean in, heart pounding in your ears, and whisper the password, Descendium. No wand fireworks, no choir of ghosts, just a quiet, mechanical shudder as the hump in the statue swings open like a secret trapdoor. 1 second, stone. The next, a black mouth in the floor, breathing out cold air and dust. You're not supposed to go in. Obviously, you go in. If you're wondering what it's like in that tunnel, it is not glamorous. This is not the Hogwarts Express. It's narrow, scratchy, and just damp enough underfoot that you start wondering what, exactly, you're stepping in. The ceiling hangs low, forcing you into an awkward half-hunch, half-scuttle that would absolutely get you roasted if anyone could see you. Harry's first trip in Prisoner of Azkaban is basically a stealth workout, crawling, stumbling, wand lit, trying not to sneeze as dust tickles his nose, but walked slowly. After the war, it turns into something almost meditative. Your footsteps crunch on old dirt. The walls close you in, but in a way that feels safe now, like the castle itself is wrapping around you. You hear your own breathing, steady and loud, while somewhere way above classes are happening, essays are being panicked over, and you're just under it all, moving through this quiet, forbidden artery. Eventually, the passage tilts upward. The air shifts. It smells sweeter. You climb a few rough steps, press against a trap door, and suddenly you're in the Honeyduke's cellar, squeezed between crates of chocolate frogs and boxes of sugar quills. The floor is cool, the room is crowded with jars and barrels, and the sugar in the air is so thick it almost feels warm. Above you faintly is the cozy murmur of Hogsmeade life. Laughter, clinking jars, someone arguing about fizzing whizbees. Now, during the war, that same route stops being a cute prank and starts looking like a lifeline. A tunnel from Hogwarts straight into a shop full of food, out of sight of Death Eaters and Carrows. Yeah, take a moment. Nobody writes it down in a history book, but you can imagine students or staff quietly moving bread, potions, messages, maybe even sneaking someone out. The Honeyduke's passage suddenly reads like a horror story footnote, the sweet shop that could have been a smuggling hub. After Voldemort falls, the whole thing gets emotionally patched over. McGonagall's in charge, the Dementors are gone, and the wizarding world is trying to remember how to breathe again. Which, if you've been paying attention, means Hogwarts doesn't erase its scars, it repurposes them. The one eyed witch passage ends up as a semi open secret. Prefects pretend not to know. Filch absolutely knows and apparently chooses his battles. You get McGonagall era students using that same tunnel for late night Honeydukes runs, hauling back bags of sherbet lemons for a friend's birthday, or staging surprise chocolate feasts for stressed out fifth years. It becomes a place where Gryffindors and Slytherins sneak through together, arguing about which fudge is best while trying not to drop anything in the dark. A once dangerous artery turns into a sugar vein under Hogwarts, pumping comfort instead of fear. For now, let's celebrate that tiny rebellion. The idea that a passage built for mischief and shadowy trips can end up delivering joy. Because the castle isn't done yet. If one old tunnel can shift from secret risk to cozy tradition, what about the passages that never got that kind of redemption arc? The ones that stayed dangerous, stayed broken, or quietly evolved into something much stranger? Yeah, we're going there next. And if you think a tunnel turning into a cozy snack route is wild, wait until the castle hands you a passage that was never about mischief at all. Let's start with the angriest tree in the wizarding world. The Whomping Willow is not subtle. Gnarled branches, wild temper, full commitment to attempted murder if you get within 10 feet. It's sitting out on the grounds like Hogwarts ordered a regular tree and the universe delivered a boss battle. But if you're wondering why anyone would plant a homicidal shrub next to a school, it's because that tree is actually a guard dog. Buried in all that violence is a single tiny knot on the trunk. Touch it, and the willow just freezes. One little press, and you've unlocked a hidden trapdoor at its roots, leading straight into a tunnel nobody's supposed to know about. That tunnel didn't appear by accident. Dumbledore had it built for one boy. Young Remus Lupin, quiet, clever, and bitten by a werewolf before he ever got his Hogwarts letter. The Shrieking Shack was set up as his transformation site, and the Whomping Willow Passage was his monthly escape route. While everyone else saw a haunted house in Hogsmeade, Lupin knew it as the place he went so he wouldn't kill his classmates. Compassion weaponized as architecture. Picture his journey. The willow stilled, the hatch open, and Remus slipping down alone, robes brushing stone. The tunnel is long, low, echoing, the kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Every footstep is a countdown. Every drip of water from the ceiling reminds him he's on this narrow road between two lives, the boy who sits in charms, and the creature who will claw the walls of the shack until morning. The passage is his lifeline because it lets him stay at school at all. It's also the hallway he walks toward supernatural misery again and again. Yeah, take a moment, and then his friends find out. The marauders turn Lupin's lonely road into their nightly racetrack, animagus forms and bad decisions everywhere. What started in fear ends up wrapped in friendship, pranks, and a living map that literally labels this trauma tunnel like it's just another shortcut. Years later, Harry, Ron, and Hermione barrel through the same passage in Prisoner of Azkaban. No idea they're running along Lupin's old dread path, just trying not to die, which, if you've been paying attention, is their brand. Fast forward again, and the Shrieking Shack levels up from werewolf isolation chamber to Voldemort's war room in Deathly Hallows. The same floorboards that heard Lupin's howls end up hearing Nagini's cage slide, and Voldemort mutter strategy while he thinks he's winning. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy? After the war? Look, nobody was surprised if that passage got sealed, warded, or quietly erased from student access. But you know Hogwarts. Even if the stones are locked, the story still walks the grounds. The emotional ghost of that tunnel lingers near the willow, a reminder that not every secret was carved for contraband sweets or drama. Some were built out of sheer, stubborn kindness. And if a passage born from pain can be turned into a battlefield, what about the ones that were dangerous from day one? The roots that never got redeemed at all? We'll get to that later. From a violent tree to a violent house, the emotional ghost of that tunnel doesn't stop at the roots of the whomping willow. It runs all the way up the hill to the shrieking shack, that crooked silhouette watching Hogsmeade like it's judging everyone's butterbeer choices. Let's start with the exterior because the wizarding world loves a dramatic set piece. The shack squats above the village, boards nailed haphazardly across its windows, like even the glass tried to escape. The roofline sags, the chimney leans, and the whole place looks like one solid breeze away from collapsing directly onto someone's honeyduke's bag. For decades, villagers pointed at it and proudly announced it was the most haunted building in Britain. Not just haunted, the most haunted. Top tier, premium, scream per minute real estate. If you're wondering how many actual ghosts live there, zero. Not a single one. The whole legend was a cover story for one boy and one very specific kind of suffering. During Remus Lupin's school years, that tunnel from the Whomping Willow ended up as his private artery out of Hogwarts, shuttling him under the grounds to this isolated house every full moon. The shrieks were not poltergeists, not banshees, not some cursed choir practice. They were Lupin, bones snapping, mind unraveling, trying not to hurt anybody while the village congratulated itself on having such a picturesque haunting, which, if you've been paying attention, makes that house feel a lot less like a horror attraction and a lot more like a medical ward built out of shame. Dumbledore reinforced the walls, sealed the doors, and let the rumors grow, because fear was safer than the truth in a world where werewolves were treated like walking disasters. Then came that one absolutely unhinged night in Prisoner of Azkaban. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Sirius, Lupin, Peter Pettigrew, one unconscious Snape, a full moon, and about 7 years of unresolved trauma all crammed into those dusty rooms. The shack went from background creepiness to center stage for identity reveals, animagus drama, and the moment Harry almost got the family he'd been denied. Yeah, take a moment. After the war started eating everything, the shack graduated again. In Deathly Hallows, Voldemort chose it as the place to murder Snape, like he was picking a random murder Airbnb on the edge of town. Nagini in her horrible bubble, Snape bleeding out on the floor, Harry watching from the shadows. The house that once held Lupin's private agony got stained with a different kind of horror, cold, strategic execution. Post-war, nobody queues up to renovate. The tunnel lies quiet, the boards stay on the windows, the shrieks are gone, but the stories, those multiply. Now students whisper that Snape's ghost prowls the upstairs landing, or that on full moons you can hear both a wolf and a man crying together. They trade half-true tales about Lupin's secret past, about Harry seeing Snape die, layering brand new ghost stories over an old, very human tragedy. And while some passages like this one were built for pain, not every hidden route out of Hogwarts is soaked in trauma. Some of them exist for something much more mundane and frankly adorable. Sneaking into Hogsmeade for snacks and shopping when you absolutely do not have permission. We'll get to that later. So, snacks and shopping. Let's start with the obvious destination for Hogwarts mischief, Hogsmeade. If you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed a pattern. Again and again, the castle spits you out in or around this one tiny village, like Hogsmeade is the official pressure valve for every bad decision a student is about to make. Secret crush to meet? Hogsmeade. Illegally acquired skiving snack boxes? Hogsmeade. Low-key planning a resistance movement while the Death Eaters run your school? Yeah. Take a moment. Still Hogsmeade. The clearest example is the Honeyduke's Run. You know the one. Behind the one-eyed witch statue, you tap the hump, whisper your password, and suddenly you're in a tunnel that feels like it was carved by someone who really loved sweets and really hated supervision. It runs all the way under the grounds and pops you out in the Honeyduke's cellar, surrounded by crates of chocolate frogs and fizzing whiz-bees, like the universe personally approves your bad life choices. But if you're wondering, that's just the one we actually see. The Marauder's map labels 7 secret passages out of Hogwarts, and we only get a proper tour of a couple. The rest? Just little inked lines ending in tiny Hogsmeade buildings, unnamed cellars, or awkward dead ends. Some of those tunnels are said to be blocked, caved in, or too dangerous, which, if you've been paying attention, is basically an engraved invitation for a Hogwarts student to try them anyway. Blocked by what exactly? Time, for one. Hogwarts is old. Stone shifts, roots grow, underground streams move. The secret infrastructure ages, collapses, and occasionally gets accidentally bricked up by a caretaker who is absolutely done with first years appearing in Madame Rosmerta's broom cupboard at 2 a.m. Look, nobody was surprised when at least one passage ended up unusable. The real shock is that more of them weren't. So picture this: a tunnel that used to lead to a cozy little Hogsmeade Inn, the kind of place that served slightly illegal fire whiskey and very legal stew. The inn closes, the building changes hands. The new owner has no idea there's a door behind the wine rack. Decades go by. The tunnel floods halfway, the ceiling sags, and now it's just this half drowned corridor where particularly stubborn, mud loving students go because they heard a rumor there's still a dry crate of butterbeer at the other end. Spoiler, there isn't, just mildew and regret. And those other dotted lines on the map, some probably lead into abandoned storerooms behind shops, or forgotten corners of the Hog's Head, where Aberforth pretends he absolutely does not see teenagers dripping tunnel mud onto his floor. For now, let's celebrate that Hogsmeade quietly became the unofficial back door of Hogwarts, the place where mischief and later the DA both slipped in and out, while the adults pretended not to notice. But here's the problem. If every line on that parchment simply ran to Hogsmeade, the story would be too neat. And Hogwarts doesn't do neat. At least one exit almost certainly doesn't go to the village at all. It breaks the pattern, and it starts in a room that isn't supposed to exist, that can open onto anywhere it wants. The moment the room of requirement gets involved, the map, the rules, and maybe even the castle itself stop playing fair. So if the map, the rules, and the castle stop playing fair, who's actually in charge of the maze now? Enter the room of requirement, which, if you've been paying attention, is basically Hogwarts saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself." Let's start with what this thing really is. On paper, it's just a room that appears when someone really needs it. In practice, it's a sentient, shape-shifting cheat code built into the castle. You walk past the blank wall 3 times, thinking hard about what you need, and the school literally edits itself to help you. Sometimes it's a bathroom for a desperate headmaster. Sometimes it's a storage dump full of centuries of bad decisions. Sometimes it's a fully equipped training hall for a bunch of teenagers planning an armed resistance between Charm's homework. The old secret passages are carved stone, fixed routes, smug little lines on the Marauder's map. The room is different. It can generate doors and corridors that did not exist 5 minutes ago. You can be on the 7th floor and, because you're begging for somewhere safe to practice spells where nobody can find us, the castle opens up a door into a soundproof, windowless arena with cushions, books, and an industrial supply of broken furniture to hex. That's not architecture, that's improvisation. Look, nobody was surprised that Dumbledore's army ended up here. It's the only place big enough, quiet enough, and petty enough to hide from Dolores Umbridge. First, it's just a secret classroom, cushions, a fireplace, a sneakoscope in the corner like a nervous chaperone. But after Voldemort takes over and the Carrows turn Hogwarts into dark arts summer camp, the room levels up. It becomes a full underground base camp with hammocks, stolen blankets, a makeshift kitchen, and food smuggled in through exits the rest of the castle pretends not to see. During Deathly Hallows, Neville and the DA basically move in. The room listens as they ask for somewhere we can hide and not starve, and it responds with beds, food, and crucially, multiple ways out. Secret doors that open behind tapestries, ladders that drop into forgotten corridors, one very specific tunnel that connects straight to a dingy little pub run by a man who looks allergic to customer service. Here's the philosophical whiplash. Before the room, a secret passage is a thing. A tunnel, a door, a trick step you memorize. With the room, a secret passage becomes a conversation. You ask for safety, it gives you a door that locks behind you. You ask for escape, it gives you a tunnel that wasn't there yesterday and might not be there tomorrow. Yeah. Take a moment. Hogwarts is literally co-authoring your route in real time, and if you're wondering how our scruffy resistance fighters are getting food, messages, and new recruits while hiding inside a wall, we'll get to that later. For now, let's celebrate the most chaotic upgrade of all. One of those room-grown passages doesn't just lead anywhere. It leads to the Hog's Head, a secret door in the back, and a very grumpy barman who accidentally becomes the doorman of a revolution. From hidden dorm to hidden pub. The upgrade nobody ordered, but everybody needed. Let's start with the vibe at Hogwarts that year, because it is bleak. Snape is headmaster. The Carrows are basically fascist substitute teachers with wands, and detention has quietly rebranded into legalized torture. If you've been paying attention, this is the year when answering a question wrong might get you crucioed in front of your classmates. Fun times. Neville, Luna, and Ginny try to restart Dumbledore's army like it's just another term of secret meetings and cool Patronus practice. Except the Carrows don't play. Punishments get worse, students disappear, and suddenly Neville Longbottom, former cauldron melter in chief, ends up as the face of open rebellion. When the Carrows start targeting him personally, the room of requirement stops being a training space and becomes home, a hidden dorm for a hunted resistance. Inside, the room morphs into exactly what they need: hammocks, cushions, stolen blankets, and that wild assortment of Hogwarts junk it's been hoarding for centuries. But it does one more thing. It quietly opens a door. Not the front door, a new one. A rough, rock-hewn tunnel mouth in the wall that wasn't there yesterday. If you're wondering how desperate you have to be to walk into a freshly grown cave in a magic castle, this desperate. The DA steps through and finds a narrow passage sloping steadily downward, the floor uneven, the ceiling low enough that taller students keep smacking their heads. No torches, no friendly sconces, just wand light bouncing off damp stone and the sound of feet and scared breathing. It feels like it goes forever. Down past the foundations, away from the Carrows, away from the portraits that might snitch, until finally the air changes. It smells like smoke, goats, and something fried a little too long. The tunnel ends behind a portrait in the back of the hog's head, and the first time that frame swings open, Aberforth Dumbledore nearly has a heart attack and a stroke at the same time. Look, nobody was surprised, he complained. The grumpiest barman in the wizarding world suddenly has a secret door full of teenagers pouring into his storage room, but he still shoves plates of something vaguely edible at them, growls questions, and passes on news from outside. His shabby little pub, the place where the first DA meeting once happened, ends up as the unofficial back door of Hogwarts resistance. Imagine the emotional whiplash. One minute you're hiding from a Carrow's curse, the next you're stumbling out of the tunnel into dim, smoky warmth, goat smell, and a crackling fire. Aberforth muttering about bloody kids, bien, while quietly pushing extra bread across the bar. Yeah, take a moment. After the war, does McGonagall brick this up? Not a chance. She's too smart. She probably wards it to the eyeballs, locks it behind staff-only magic, and files it mentally under break glass in case of absolute disaster. A few trusted students over the years? Maybe. We'll get to that later when Hogwarts starts quietly rethinking which secrets it's willing to keep. But that's the emergency stuff. Day to day, Hogwarts doesn't need full tunnels to mess with you. It has something better. The entire staircase tower acting like a moody, over-caffeinated traffic system. Let's start with that image you already have in your head. The grand staircase at night. Dozens of staircases crisscrossing in midair like some unhinged Escher painting that got sorted into Ravenclaw. Steps grinding, chains clanking, portraits pretending they're not watching you almost die. One staircase swings away just as you reach it. Another glides into place so perfectly it feels like the castle is nudging you. You think you're choosing your route to charms? The castle is actually speed running you toward Filch, or away from Peeves, or straight past the fat lady so she can gossip about your hair. If you're wondering where the secret passage part is, it's right under your feet. Literally. Because Hogwarts doesn't just move whole staircases, it booby traps individual steps. The vanishing step that swallows Harry's leg on his way to see Dumbledore? That isn't a glitch. That's a micro password. Get the step wrong and the castle just eats your foot, leaves you dangling like a confused bat until someone hauls you out. Get it right and you flow through the staircase like water. Same stones, totally different experience. Those vanishing steps are tiny, localized secrets. First years hit them and panic. Third years groan and yank them free. By fifth year, you don't even look down. You just skip the third step from the top because some older student hissed, Neddy, never touch that one, during your first week, and it branded itself into your soul faster than any history of magic date. And it's not just stairs. Trick doors and walls turn ordinary corridors into bite-sized shortcuts. A door that won't budge for Alohomora, but pops open if you tickle the panel near the hinge. A wall that looks solid stone until you lean into it at the exact right angle and just slide through like the castle decided to give you a backstage pass. Look, nobody was surprised that Fred and George treated this like their personal playground. Whole generations of pranksters ended up with mental blueprints that would make a cartographer cry. Over time, students start carrying these maps in their heads, not on parchment. Directions get passed down in whispers. Take the north stair, skip the broken step, hug the left wall, ignore the portrait that coughs, the next suit of armor hides a shortcut. The castle becomes a social maze as much as a physical one. If you know the right people, you get the right routes. If you don't, you get lost and arrive to potions 10 minutes late and emotionally destroyed. And this is where it all quietly levels you up. These tiny secrets train you to think like Hogwarts itself, to assume that every wall might be lying, every staircase might have an opinion, every dead end might just be waiting for the right question. So when you finally stumble on a full tunnel to Hogsmeade, it doesn't feel like you're breaking the rules. It feels like you've finally unlocked a higher difficulty setting. But what happens when the castle gives you a passage that isn't just shorter, it's alive, changing, and occasionally full of Death Eaters? Yeah, take a moment, because that's where Hogwarts stops playing and the Room of Requirement starts rewriting the whole idea of what a secret passage even is. And if the Room of Requirement is Hogwarts going full improv theater, the rest of the castle is more committed to props. The school has a type. It loves hiding doors behind things that are already dramatic. You've got knights, gargoyles, weeping witches, and portraits that look like they're judging your life choices harder than McGonagall at a broken teacup. Let's start with our gateway drug, the one-eyed witch. You remember her. Hump, password, Honeyduke's cellar, instant sugar heist. That statue basically taught an entire generation of Gryffindors that if a piece of stone looks weird enough, you should absolutely poke it until it opens, which, if you've been paying attention, is how Hogwarts wants you to behave. Curious, slightly reckless, and probably late for class. From there, the pattern explodes. Look at the stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office. It's not just a door. It's a stone bouncer with a candy addiction. Say the right sweet, it jumps aside, and suddenly you're on a spiral staircase being carried up into the nerve center of the school. No hinges, no visible seam, just architecture, pretending it's not complicit. Then you've got tapestries. The big one everyone remembers is Barnabas the Barmy, mid-failed ballet lesson with a troupe of trolls. On one level, it's a visual roast of the wizarding world's worst choreographer. But that corridor opposite the Room of Requirement, it ends up being ground zero for one of the strangest secret routes of all time, where a blank stretch of wall decides what door you need most. The tapestry is like a misdirection spell in fabric form. You're staring at the trolls, the castle is quietly rearranging reality behind you. And portraits. Oh, the portraits. If you're wondering where Hogwarts hides its truly chaotic transport system, it's not in the floors, it's in the frames. We see the fat lady guarding Gryffindor Tower, her replacement Sir Cadogan trying to turn the common room into a Renaissance LARP, and all those other paintings gossiping in the background. What they don't advertise is that many of these frames connect. Characters can step out of one painting, wander through the castle's walls, and reappear in another. For living people who can actually climb into art, that's a two-dimensional secret passage network, a flat, moving, opinionated tunnel system. The headmaster's portraits use it to pass messages between offices. Phineas Nigellus pops between Grimmauld Place and Hogwarts like he's got built-in flu powder. Imagine being able to do that as a student. Sorry I'm late. I took the Vanishing Vermeer shortcut. Pattern interrupt. What if one of those unlabeled Marauders map passages isn't a tunnel at all? What if it's a portrait route they never quite cracked, or a statue they walked past 100 times without poking in the right spot? Background set dressing with a secret life. That random night near the library, the chipped angel by the greenhouses, the tapestry you always assumed was just a tapestry. We'll get to that later, but for now, let's celebrate the mystery. In a few sections, we're going to slow everything down and walk calmly and in first person through one of those implied but never shown statue passages. No map, no marauders, just you, the stone, and the feeling that you finally found the door they missed. So if the tapestry might be hiding something, the real question is, who started hiding things first? To answer that, you have to rewind way before Marauders, before prank wars, before Filch had a filing cabinet labeled severely whacked. You go back to four slightly unhinged geniuses standing on a cliff and deciding to build a school in the middle of a dangerous magical world. Let's start with the vibe. The founders aren't opening a cozy boarding school with a nice Ofsted rating. They're building a fortress. You've got muggles nearby who are already suspicious, dark creatures in the forests, and a wizarding world that treats wand control like a fun suggestion. And the architects? Gryffindor, the heroic chaos machine, Ravenclaw, the puzzle-obsessed overachiever, Hufflepuff, the quiet logistics queen, and Slytherin, who looked at a cliff face and apparently thought, you know what this needs? A secret monster basement. If you're wondering whether they were designing for pranks, yeah, no. Early passages were about survival. Imagine being a first year when a local witch hunt gets too close. You need escape routes that funnel kids from dormitories straight into the mountain under the lake or out to the forest without anyone outside ever seeing a door open. You need private corridors for staff so the professors can move during a siege, get to the hospital wing, or stash volatile ingredients without dragging 30 terrified 11-year-olds past the exploding cauldrons. And then you need the really secret spaces, the ones only a founder and maybe one terrified house elf knew about, hidden chambers for dangerous experiments, for housing creatures that are perfectly safe as long as nobody screams, for storing artifacts that absolutely should not be left in a glass cabinet in the trophy room. Those early tunnels aren't jokes, they're contingency plans, which, if you've been paying attention, makes the Chamber of Secrets look a lot less random. The chamber is basically a mega secret passage that ended up as a lair. A hidden sink in a student bathroom, a vertical shaft, a long stone tunnel that runs under the castle and under the Black Lake to a colossal hall lined with snake columns. This is Slytherin's whole personality written in architecture. Subterranean, selective, and one wrong word away from death by basilisk. Look at the Marauder's map again, and those little tunnel-blocked notes get way more interesting. Some of those mysterious dead ends feel like the fossilized skeletons of founder-era routes, passages that once led to escape docks on the lake, or to cliffside exits, or to long-gone outbuildings, now cut off because of rockfalls, anti-apparition wards, or a later headmaster saying, "No, we're not keeping the corridor that opens directly into the forbidden forest, thank you." Over centuries of new towers, shifting staircases, and magical repairs, you get weird intersections where ancient escape tunnels now run straight behind a broom cupboard or halfway through a charms classroom. And still, the most emotionally loaded Founder-era passage isn't on the map at all, because it's not a tidy corridor, it's a story, a whispered idea that somewhere in the pipes and stone and dark under the lake, there's a path into the chamber that isn't just about snakes and death, but about what Hogwarts chooses to remember and what it chooses to bury. We'll get to that later. For now, let's celebrate the fact that the castle itself might be keeping one last enormous secret from everyone, even from the map that was supposed to show it all. So if the castle is hiding one last enormous secret, you know exactly where it's going to dump you. Straight into the most dramatic corridor ever built, the Chamber of Secrets. Let's start with the entrance, because it is unhinged even by Hogwarts standards. You don't go through some epic Gothic archway. You go through a broken girl's bathroom that everyone avoids. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom with the dripping taps, the cracked tiles, and a ghost who treats every conversation like a tragic one-woman show. One sink has a tiny snake engraved on the tap, which, if you've been paying attention, is the architectural equivalent of a spoiler. Harry leans in, hisses in Parseltongue, and the entire sink unit grinds away to reveal a stone shaft. No stairs, no safety charms, just a spiral slide straight down into the throat of the castle. That slide dumps you into the main tunnel, and this is where it stops being a room and becomes a full-blown subterranean motorway. Long, echoing ribs of stone arching overhead, serpent carvings slithering along the walls. Parts are flooded with water lapping around your ankles because apparently Slytherin did not believe in basic drainage. The scale is ridiculous. This is a passageway built so a basilisk can cruise along at top speed, not so a 12-year-old can politely walk through with a wand and low self-esteem. As you move deeper, the chamber reveals it isn't just one big snake hallway. It branches. First, you get that antechamber lined with massive snake statues, jaws open, fangs bared, like a very specific design brief of intimidating reptile chic. Past that is the final hall, the one dominated by Salazar Slytherin's giant stone face, which is equal parts founder memorial and nightmare fuel. Somewhere off that main artery is a tucked away nook, the quiet little space where Fawkes appears with the sorting hat, because even in the middle of a murder tunnel, Hogwarts finds room for a Deus Ex Phoenix. And the secrecy? Next level. Only a Parselmouth can open the entrance, which means 99.9% of the wizarding world could stand in that bathroom for a century and never find it. It doesn't show up on the Marauders map at all. The four smartest troublemakers Hogwarts ever produced managed to chart 7 secret exits and still miss the literal monster-sized tunnel under their feet. Look, nobody was surprised that most of the staff don't even believe it exists. It's Hogwarts' most successful long-term secret route by a mile. After the war, the Chamber flips categories. It goes from myth and murder site to deeply awkward facilities problem. McGonagall, a couple of trusted staff, maybe a very tired ministry inspector, end up standing in that ruined hall going, "So, drain it, ward it, turn it into extremely cursed storage? You can't exactly list giant basilisk tunnel on the prospectus for nervous muggle-born parents." If you're wondering whether they repurpose that colossal space, we'll get to that later. For now, let's celebrate the fact that Hogwarts is permanently sitting on a secret corridor system the size of a small underground city, quietly waiting for its next purpose. And speaking of that underground city, we have to talk about the four idiots who tried to map it, the Marauders versus Hogwarts itself. Because as impressive as that parchment is, it is absolutely not the full story. Let's start with the project. You've got James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, four brilliant, rule-averse chaos gremlins who basically turned the castle into an extracurricular activity. While everyone else was revising for OWLs, they were systematically stress-testing Hogwarts like it was a very large, very haunted escape room. Learning prefect passwords, shadowing Filch and Madame Pomfrey, following ghosts on their nightly routes just to see which walls they drifted through. Over years, that obsession ended up becoming the Marauders map. It wasn't one big spell. It was a long, petty, collaborative masterpiece. Every time they discovered a trick step or a shifting wall, they added a new ink vein. Every time they overheard a password or watched a portrait swing open, the parchment got smarter. The map is literally their teenage brain on paper. Nosy, overconfident, and way too detailed about where Snape is at all times. If you're wondering how they pulled this off without dying by detention, the methods were creative. James had the invisibility cloak, which, if you've been paying attention, is basically a cheat code. Remus had the whole "I secretly need a murder tunnel once a month" situation, which gave them access to the Whomping Willow passage. Add 3 unregistered animagi sneaking around as animals, and suddenly you've got a surveillance squad Hogwarts security did not sign up for. They pressed every statue, poked every portrait, whispered nonsense at random gargoyles at 2 in the morning. Trial and error with a side of probable concussion. Discovery wasn't an accident, it was a long-term group hobby. Their idea of bonding time wasn't chess or Quidditch. It was, what if that suit of armor is hiding a staircase to somewhere we're not supposed to be? Yeah, take a moment. But here's where it gets interesting. For all that effort, the map only shows 7 secret exits out of Hogwarts. We see the Honeyduke's tunnel behind the One-Eyed Witch. We know about the Whomping Willow route to the Shrieking Shack, and that's basically all the books bother to explain. Meanwhile, you've got the Chamber of Secrets, sitting under everyone's feet like a cursed basement Airbnb, and it never appears. The Room of Requirement, it can literally open a passage to the Hog's Head, and the map acts like it's just a weird broom closet. Look, nobody was surprised that some things stayed off limits. The chamber is bound up with Parseltongue and Salazar's personal issues. The Room of Requirement only appears when it wants to. That's not just secret. That's magically private. It feels like the castle itself is curating what goes on the menu. Mischief grade tunnels to Hogsmeade? Sure. Monster Lair and Trauma Vault? Absolutely not. So did the Marauders ever suspect they were being managed by the building? Did Remus, years later, look at that blank stretch of map over the second-floor girls' bathroom and think, "What are you hiding?" We'll get to that later when we follow a post-war student trying to update the map and realizing Hogwarts still likes to keep a few secrets for itself. So jump forward to the Caro's year and that blank space on the map. It's not just a mystery anymore, it's survival. Let's start with the vibe because it is rancid. You've got Amicus Caro turning defense against the dark arts into here's how to actually do the illegal curses, and Electo running muggle studies like a racist podcast that never ends. Detention stops meaning right lines and starts meaning get crucioed. The corridors are full of students with bruises, whispered passwords, and the constant feeling that Filch was somehow the least of their problems. While Snape is doing his morally conflicted bat routine upstairs, the Carrows are turning Hogwarts into a training camp. And the kids? They quietly start doing what Hogwarts students do best, organizing resistance and not telling any adults. Remember that Honeyduke's tunnel that used to be Harry's secret sweet delivery system? Yeah, take a moment. That same passage behind the one-eyed witch statue becomes a literal lifeline. If you're wondering how the DA kept going when Hogsmeade visits were basically a hostage situation, this is how. Food, bandages, potions, smuggled in from friendly shopkeepers and the Hog's Head, dragging heavy bags through the dark while listening for the sound of Caro footsteps overhead. The portrait shortcuts level up too. Those chatty paintings that used to complain about being woken up at 2 a.m., they end up as the castle's encrypted messaging app. Neville slips through one frame to tell Seamus about a meeting. Ginny, accidentally, lingers near another to pass along which corridor to avoid. The fat lady, the knights, the random monks in corridors you never learn the names of, all watching, listening, choosing which students they'll swing wide for. And the hidden classrooms, the ones you barely noticed when they were just convenient makeout spots or last-minute study caves, suddenly become Dumbledore's Army HQ. For a while, the DA plays magical whack-a-mole with these rooms, shifting from one to another every few nights, wiping chalkboards, vanishing scorch marks, trying to stay one step ahead before they finally retreat into the room of requirement full time. At the center of all of this is Neville Longbottom. The boy who couldn't find his toad now knows every staircase mood swing and every trick step by heart. He's the unofficial cartographer of the Resistance, the human marauder's map of his era, walking routes in his head because writing anything down could get someone tortured, which, if you've been paying attention, is the most Gryffindor upgrade arc of all time. Emotionally, the castle rewires itself. That Honeyduke's tunnel used to mean let's get sweets. Now it means let's not get tortured. Every stone remembers both. Students walk where Fred and George once skipped, but with wands drawn, hearts hammering, trying not to think about how this used to be fun. The mischief is still there, but it's layered under fear, stubborn courage, and the quiet agreement that if someone gets caught, nobody talks. And after the war, those routes don't just reset to prank mode. They're carrying ghosts now. Some passages stay open, some quietly collapse, and one future headmistress has to decide which secrets Hogwarts is allowed to keep. We'll get to that later when the castle starts choosing which scars to show and which to hide inside the walls forever. So, the war ends, the dust settles, and Hogwarts is still standing, barely. You've got shattered towers, burned tapestries, and secret tunnels that just doubled as evacuation routes and ambush points. Yeah, take a moment, because when the rubble's cleared and the portraits are rehung, McGonagall isn't just looking at broken stone. She's looking at a castle full of shortcuts that almost got her kids killed, and also quietly saved dozens of them. That's the emotional migraine she inherits with the headmistress office. Let's start with the practical nightmare. Step one is a staff-led audit, Hogwarts style. Flitwick, Sprout, Slughorn, even Hagrid all walking the grounds together, checking every trick step, shifting wall and vanishing staircase that once sent first years into mild cardiac arrest. The moving stairs stay, obviously, because Hogwarts is allergic to being straightforward, but the really dodgy bits, those get flagged. And if you're wondering where the Marauder's map is in all this, it's not rotting in a drawer. That thing ends up in very safe hands. Picture McGonagall, Harry, and probably Hermione standing over it like it's a living blueprint of every bad decision James Potter ever made. 7 labeled secret exits, dozens of suspicious little corridors, and a whole lot of "wait, that leads where?" moments. That's just the start, because the map doesn't show everything. So McGonagall does the smartest thing you can do in a semi-sentient castle. She interviews the residents who never leave. Portraits who remember when the founders were still arguing about plumbing. Ghosts who watch the marauders test run half these routes. The Fat Lady, the Grey Lady, the Bloody Baron, even Sir Cadogan apparently, all get questioned about doors that open if you tap the third brick or sing the school song out of tune. From there you get policy, actual rules for chaos. Some passages are sealed completely. The Whomping Willow Tunnel to the Shrieking Shack? Structurally cursed, emotionally cursed, just cursed. Brick it up. Any tunnel that runs under half the hillside with no support spells left? Gone. No one wants Hogsmeade swallowed by sinkhole on McGonagall's watch. Others are reclassified as emergency exits. The old Honeyduke's passage behind the One-Eyed Witch, reinforced, warded, and keyed to staff and prefects so it can still move students out in a crisis. The Room of Requirement's habit of spitting out a door to the Hog's Head, monitored by Castle Magic and by Aberforth, who absolutely installs the passive-aggressive barman version of security. And then there are the passages that stay technically open, but not unsupervised. Hidden stairwells between towers, sliding panels that link house corridors, those weird little loops that let you get from the Great Hall to the kitchens in record time. Hogwarts keeps them because if you've been paying attention, the castle has always been a little bit of a co-conspirator. McGonagall's real calculus isn't just safety, it's soul. Over-sanitize the place, and Hogwarts stops feeling like Hogwarts. The secrets are part of how kids learn to be brave, curious, occasionally idiotic, in a growth-building way. So she trims the lethal edges and leaves the mischief. For now, let's celebrate the adults making responsible choices. Because while they're drafting safety wards and emergency maps, the next generation is already eyeing the surviving tunnels for midnight snack runs, secret dates, and quiet walks where they can grieve without an audience. And those stories are just getting started. So what happens when a war-built maze doesn't get torn down? It just stays? You end up with two Hogwartses layered on top of each other, the one that remembers and the one that refuses to. Let's start with those first post-war years when you've got students who saw the Carrows every day sitting in charms next to 11-year-olds whose biggest fear is getting lost on the moving staircases. Same corridors, totally different ghosts. The castle looks repaired, but the air around certain walls is heavier, like the stone itself remembers who ran past and why. If you're wondering why people avoid the one-eyed witch statue at first, it's because everyone old enough knows what it meant to sprint toward that hump with Death Eaters in the building. And then, really slowly, the tone shifts, not with some big speech, but with tiny, almost rude acts of joy. A fourth-year Gryffindor hears the older kids whisper about the Honeyduke's passage, and, instead of planning an escape route, plans a surprise birthday feast. They nick blankets from the common room, float down baskets of stolen treacle tart and chocolate frogs, and light the tunnel with soft Lumos charms, not defensive hexes. Same tunnel Harry used to dodge Filch and the Carrows, now full of badly harmonized happy birthday and someone dropping a cauldron cake on their own shoe. Another night, a Ravenclaw and a Hufflepuff couple slip under the roots of the Whomping Willow. No mission, no werewolf, no secret meeting of a resistance group. They just want to climb the hill by the Shrieking Shack and watch the sunrise turn the forbidden forest gold. The Whomping Willow, which if you've been paying attention, used to be the final boss of Try Not to Die on the way to see your best friend transform, ends up as background scenery for two teenagers sharing a blanket and complaining about OWLs. Out of that, new traditions grow. Older students who survive the Carrows start leading what are basically unofficial tunnel tours, not in a trauma dump way, more like a moving campfire story. They'll walk a group of wide-eyed second years down the Honeyduke's tunnel and say, right here we hid 6 people and 3 crates of stolen bread, then follow it with, and now it's where we stash the good biscuits. Horror gets downgraded to history, then quietly upgraded to folklore. Look, nobody was surprised that walking the same stones slowly became its own kind of therapy. You retrace the path you once sprinted, except this time you're not clutching a wand, you're holding a friend's hand, or a mug of pilfered cocoa. You pause where you once tripped, press your palm to the wall, and realize your breathing doesn't spike anymore. The castle hasn't forgotten, but it's letting you walk instead of run. Quick pattern interrupt for you. We've been talking about these tunnels from the outside, but what if you could actually walk one, step by step? Later on, we'll get to a fully guided second-person journey through a reclaimed passage built to feel like a bedtime story set under Hogwarts. For now, let's celebrate the fact that the routes once mapped for war are slowly, stubbornly becoming corridors of snacks, stories, and quiet, ordinary peace. So, let's start with you. The war is over, the castle is mostly repaired, and the secret passages have quietly gone from survival tools back to chaos enablers. You've heard the stories: the sugar tunnel to Honeydukes that starts behind the one eyed witch, the werewolf route under the Whomping Willow that ends in the Shrieking Shack, the living room of requirement that can literally spit you out into the hog's head if it feels like it, plus all those everyday micro shortcuts through portraits, trick doors, and vanishing steps that upper years swear are not real while using them constantly. Now drop yourself in the middle of it. You're a fourth year at Hogwarts, it's after curfew, and you've just found the Marauder's map. Where do you go first? You're standing in the corridor, everyone else is asleep, and this bit of contraband parchment just lit up your entire mental GPS of the castle. Filch is 2 floors down, Mrs. Norris is prowling, and apparently the staircases are in one of their "we do what we want" moods. Option 1, snacks. You tap the map, whisper "mischief managed," and follow that thin ink line to the one-eyed witch hump. A quick prod, a muttered password you definitely did not overhear from a Weasley, and you're crawling through the sugar tunnel to Honeydukes. It smells like dust, sugar, and very poor decisions. You pop up in the cellar, grab a fistful of chocolate frogs and a suspiciously large bag of fizzing whizbees, and sneak back before anyone can ask why you now sound like a walking sweet trolley. Option 2, pure survival. You're late for your dorm, you round a corner, and Filch is right there on the map, closing in. One portrait over, a sleepy witch in ruffs raises an eyebrow. You duck inside, mumble something about urgent prefect business, and slip out through a different frame 3 corridors away. The portraits gossip about you for days, which, if you've been paying attention, is basically Hogwarts social media. Option 3, escape of a different kind. Classes have been brutal, the castle feels loud, and you just need to breathe. You walk past a blank stretch of wall, think as hard as you can. I need a quiet, safe path to the astronomy tower, no questions asked. The room of requirement appears, opens into a narrow, lantern lit corridor, and gently reroutes you past every patrolling teacher, every creaky stair. You end up alone under the stars, the whole wizarding world humming softly below. So, what kind of secret passage person are you? Are you using these routes for mischief and midnight chocolate raids, for last second escapes from Filch and your own terrible time management, or for quiet, hidden walks when the castle feels too heavy? Do you want adventure, avoidance, or actual peace? Because the answer says a lot about which era of Hogwarts you'd fit into. And if you're wondering which passages only existed, or only really mattered, during the Marauders' pranking prime or the DA's underground semester, yeah, take a moment. Those are coming next, and some of them change the castle in ways nobody on the map ever wrote down. So let's start with Hogwarts before everything went to hell. Pre-war. Dumbledore in the big chair. Voldemort's return, a distant theoretical nightmare adults whispered about, while the kids mostly worried about Quidditch, exams, and whether Filch would finally catch them. In that version of the castle, 4 boys looked at 7 secret exits and about 1,000 shortcuts and basically saw a personal playground, a sandbox, a test lab for chaos. The Marauders didn't just find passages, they ranked them. If you've been paying attention, you know their S tier favorite, the Honeydukes Tunnel. One statue, one password, instant sugar heist. The hump-backed one-eyed witch on the 3rd floor is basically their front door to Hogsmeade. Behind her, a long, narrow tunnel running under the grounds, straight into the Honeyduke cellar, surrounded by crates of chocolate frogs, fizzing whizbees, and enough sugar quills to power a year's worth of detentions. That's the supply line, prank fuel, emergency snack run, romantic gift delivery system when Sirius is helping James impress Lily. For now, let's celebrate the fact that nobody ever installed a lock. Then you've got the Whomping Willow passage. Different vibe entirely. Dumbledore had it built for one boy's safety, not for anyone's fun. Every month, Lupin heads across the grounds, branches clawing the air, trunk thrashing, and that little knot on the roots freezes the whole tree long enough for him to slip into the tunnel and reach the Shrieking Shack. That route is a lifeline, a medical corridor disguised as a death trap. But once 3 unreasonably loyal idiots become unregistered animagi, it also becomes their favorite, "we probably shouldn't be doing this highway." They follow him, they explore. They test how far the tunnel goes, how the shack sounds from outside, how close you can get to a transformed werewolf before the walls start shaking. It's adventure layered over fear, which, if you've been paying attention, is kind of their brand. Inside the castle, they're running a whole different network. Trick staircases, Disappearing steps, sliding panels behind tapestries, doors that only open if you ask nicely or kick them twice. James and Sirius know which shortcut dumps you near the Great Hall for a dramatic prank entrance, and which hidden corridor spits you out behind a suit of armor, perfect for a quick exit while Filch screams into the void. Picture a typical night in fifth year. James checks the map. Tiny ink dots everywhere. Filch in his office. Mrs. Norris on the second floor. Dumbledore in his study, probably pretending he doesn't see any of this. Sirius swings the invisibility cloak around the two of them, Remus muttering something about revision, while already reaching for his wand, Peter trailing behind, trying not to trip over his own feet. They tap the parchment, watch the lines of Hogwarts glow, and pick their route. Maybe the Honeyduke's tunnel for supplies. Maybe a quick detour through a moving staircase to drop dung bombs 2 floors away from where they actually are. 15 minutes later, they're emerging in Hogsmeade like it's their private back door, brushing cellar dust off their robes and acting offended anyone would suggest they walked. But that map of fun routes has a shadow burned into it. Every full moon, the same ink dots trace the same path. Castle, willow, shack. Lupin's passage is marked in their memories with blood, broken furniture, and the knowledge that one wrong move could end with someone dead. Some tunnels are for jokes, some are for survival. The Marauders know both, and those paths don't vanish after they're gone. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione inherit the map, they also inherit that whole emotional blueprint. The same passages, new stakes. The Honeyduke's tunnel stops being a prank route and becomes a wartime supply chain. The Whomping Willow passage, a battlefield. How the trio rewrite those roads is next. The same roads, new drivers. The Marauders drew the map, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione are the ones who actually stress test Hogwarts Underground. Let's start with the most iconic bad idea. Harry's first Honeyduke's run in Prisoner of Azkaban. Fred and George casually hand over the Marauders map like it's a slightly cursed birthday card, and suddenly you're behind the one-eyed witch statue whispering, "Descendium," and dropping into a tunnel that smells like dust and sugar. That first trip under the castle is pure mischief. No war, no prophecy, just a boy with an invisibility cloak, a stolen map, and the world's most chaotic older brothers as sponsors. It's framed like a theme park ride your parents would absolutely not approve of. The stone passage slopes and twists, Harry's sneaking into Honeyduke's cellar, and the biggest problem is whether he'll get caught buying fizzing Whizbees, while technically not allowed in Hogsmeade. The stakes are detention and a howler, not death and tyranny. Yeah, take a moment, because then the dial starts turning. By Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix, those same kinds of routes stop being candy runs and start being infrastructure. The Room of Requirement becomes the secret headquarters of Dumbledore's army, which, if you've been paying attention, is literally a rebellion disguised as an after-school club. People are slipping through corridors, dodging trick steps, and using hidden doors not to prank Filch but to learn how to fight for their lives. Passages mean privacy. Harry and Ron duck away from the crowds to dissect what happened in the Chamber of Secrets, to whisper about strange scars and scarier dreams, to replay the basilisk and diary and wonder what's still buried in the walls. Those quiet shortcuts become therapy hallways and strategy lanes. Hogwarts is the same maze, but the conversations it hides go from, "Did you see Malfoy's face?" to, "What if Voldemort's really back?" Then Half-Blood Prince kicks the floor out. The Room of Requirement shifts from training ground to evidence locker, hiding the Half-Blood Prince's battered potions book. It's not just a cozy room anymore, it's a moral trap. Harry uses a secret space to stash a secret weapon that might belong to a murderer. Meanwhile, Draco is running his own covert operation. If you're wondering how a stressed-out 16-year-old manages to smuggle Death Eaters into Hogwarts, the answer isn't a dusty tunnel, but vanishing cabinets, acting like a magical private passage between Borgin and Berks and the castle. Pattern interrupt. Remember Harry strolling under Hogwarts for sweets? Now jump to Deathly Hallows, where Neville and the DA are using a new Room of Requirement passage to the Hog's Head like it's a resistance supply line. The tunnel that opens into Aberforth's pub turns Hogwarts into a rebel fortress. People aren't sneaking out for butterbeer, they're sneaking in with wands, food, and backup. Same castle, same stone. But the emotional temperature of those journeys flips from giddy to desperate. Early on, secret passages protect childhood. By the end, they protect the future of the wizarding world. And after the war, the question isn't, are there secret ways out? It's, who controls them now? We'll get to that later. So, who actually ended up controlling them? For a while, the answer is a bunch of sleep deprived teenagers living in a magical bunker. Let's start with the Room of Requirement in Deathly Hallows, because this is where Hogwarts secretly turns into an underground city. You're not just talking about a cozy training space anymore. Under Snape and the Carrows, the room shifts into full survival mode. Hammocks slung from beams, food stores stacked in careful rows, piles of blankets, battered trunks, and that one corner where someone has clearly tried to start a herbology garden under a conjured sun. It's half hideout, half refugee camp, and somehow still feels like home. Apparently, the room understands fear. It feels the Carrows patrolling the corridors, the way students flinch at every footstep, and it responds by multiplying doors. Inside, you've got this maze of hidden entrances, a panel that opens behind a tapestry, a door that appears between classrooms, a stretch of blank wall that, if you walk past 3 times thinking, I need to get back, quietly melts into an exit. Each one leads to a different slice of castle life, near the kitchens, by the library, beside an unused staircase, all curated by the room's sense of what the DA needs right now. And then there's the big one, the main tunnel straight to the Hog's Head. If you're wondering how a bunch of kids under a magical dictatorship are still getting news, food, and moral support, that's your answer. The room literally punches a passage through the castle's bones and hooks it up to Aberforth Dumbledore's back room, turning an old, grouchy barman into the Resistance's supply chain. Students sneak in through Hogsmeade, stumble out into the hammocks, and suddenly the DA has fresh bread, bandages, and gossip. Neville is the one who makes all of this work. The boy who used to lose his toad now runs a small city. He remembers Fred and George's shortcuts, old marauder routes, the trick stair that eats your leg, and he layers that knowledge over the room's brand new exits. Together, it's like he's carrying a living map in his head. He organizes raids on the Carrows classrooms, rescue missions for first years, midnight runs to raid the kitchens. He knows which exit dumps you near a suit of armor you can hide behind, and which one opens practically under Snape's nose. Yeah, take a moment. Emotionally, that changes everything. Imagine walking out into the main corridor, wand in hand, knowing that behind you, literally inside the wall, is a door that will open if you need to bolt. Every hallway becomes a risk, but not a death trap. There's always a way back to hammocks, to friends, to the one place the Carrows can't touch. And after the war? Look, nobody was surprised that the room went quiet, but a place that powerful doesn't just forget. Rumor says if a later student walks that corridor and asks for a place to feel brave, the door might open onto something familiar, a stray hammock, a faded DA slogan on the stone, a draft that smells like butterbeer from a tunnel that shouldn't exist. What else did the room keep? And who's going to find it next? If the room was keeping secrets, Snape was walking through them. Literally. During his year as headmaster, you've got an ex-Death Eater, double agent, and former bullied Slytherin prefect, suddenly in charge of the same corridors he once stalked as a greasy-haired teenager with a grudge and a textbook full of murder spells. Let's start with his map in his head. Snape is Marauder's era, which, if you've been paying attention, means he grew up in the exact golden age of Hogwarts sneaking. He might not have owned the Marauder's map, but he definitely learned the hard way where James and Sirius liked to corner him, where they vanished, and which statue you avoided unless you wanted to be hexed for existing. You don't get dangled upside down in public and then forget the route the bullies took to get there. So while Harry's generation treats the one-eyed witch hump like a fun candy tunnel, Snape probably filed it under. Place where idiots disappear before curfew. He'd know about the dungeon's shortcuts, the dry, cold runs that link Slytherin to the potions classroom, and the weird half steps that cut 10 minutes off the walk to the library if you're willing to brush past a wall that feels like it's breathing. Those are the Slytherin-specific routes nobody writes down because they're worth more than a chocolate frog card. Now jump to Snape with the big office and the bigger problem. He's got Carrows in the corridors, Death Eaters at the gates, and a castle full of secret exits that could absolutely be used to smuggle in backup, or slaughter kids in their sleep. If you're wondering what a paranoid double agent does with that, it's probably not lock everything and throw away the key. He can't. Hogwarts is alive and petty. So he does the next best thing: quiet wards, silent alarms, maybe a charm on the Honeyduke's passage that pings his wand if someone bigger than a fourth year is stomping through. Maybe a nasty little jinx on the Whomping Willow tunnel that only recognizes student magic, not the oily signature of a Death Eater. He's not trying to stop all mischief. He's triaging. Let them sneak to Hogsmeade. Don't let the Carrows find a back door. And then picture this: it's 2 in the morning. The castle is too quiet. Snape walks an old stone tunnel he once ran through with blood in his mouth and humiliation burning his ears. Same damp walls, same echo. Only now he's the one with the power, and it feels like a bad joke. Yeah, take a moment. He remembers being shoved against that wall. He remembers Lily's voice, sharp and disappointed, echoing down a passage like this. Now he's the adult who has to keep a whole new generation alive in the same spaces that broke him. It's brutal. It's also exactly the kind of poetic cruelty Hogwarts specializes in. For now, let's celebrate one thing. Those secret routes, monitored or not, ended up feeding Neville's DA, moving messages, and keeping hope alive under his nose. With his help. The castle let him play gatekeeper for a year, but Hogwarts doesn't belong to any headmaster for long. In a bit, we'll flip this again and look at what happens when the castle itself decides who gets a passage and who hits a solid wall. The castle doesn't belong to any headmaster for long, and it definitely doesn't belong to the students. It belongs to the people in the frames. Because while you're dragging your mortal body through a freezing stone corridor, every painted witch and wizard on the wall is basically using Hogwarts' premium fast travel system. Let's start with how portrait travel actually works. If you're wondering why Phineas Nigellus is somehow in every room that needs sarcastic commentary, it's because witches and wizards in portraits can move between frames of themselves and sometimes slip into entirely different paintings that will have them. They gossip, they eavesdrop, they complain about drafts, and together, they've accidentally created the wizarding world's most chaotic messenger network. We see it in small moments. The fat lady, guardian of Gryffindor Tower and professional screamer, doesn't just sit in her own frame. When Sirius slashes her portrait, she disappears to another painting to hide, and she casually calls on her friend Violet at parties. That's not just socializing, that's a built-in communication grid. One shout, one step sideways, and a warning can move from one end of a corridor to the other faster than Filch can say, "No running." Then you've got Phineas Nigellus Black, the patron saint of reluctant help. His portrait hangs in the headmaster's office and in Grimmauld Place, which, if you've been paying attention, basically means he's a living flu call. Dumbledore and later Snape use him to pass messages between Hogwarts and the Order. Harry, Ron, and Hermione drag him along in a bag, and he still manages to relay information back to the castle. One smug, painted Slytherin just casually bridging miles. Now scale that up. Every former headmaster and headmistress in those frames. They can wander from portrait to portrait in the office, pop into the corridors, and offer unsolicited advice like spectral grandparents who never leave. They warn McGonagall, they advise Snape, they practically form a moving, muttering security council that can be in 10 places in the time it takes you to find one secret staircase. So, yeah, take a moment, because this is its own secret passage system. Information, warnings, passwords, even the occasional object can travel through portraits faster than any hidden tunnel. Phineas delivers the portrait of Ariana Dumbledore to the Room of Requirement, which then opens a passage to the Hog's Head. That's a portrait enabling a door that enables a tunnel. You're not beating that with a trick step. Pattern interrupt for your brain. Picture yourself slogging through the Honeyduke's passage, covered in dust, dodging spiders, praying you don't sneeze. Now cut to a portrait of some 17th century wizard, calmly stepping sideways into another frame and arriving in the Great Hall before you've even reached the one-eyed witch. And here's the slightly terrifying part. These portraits have watched centuries of students slipping behind tapestries, tickling stone fruit, vanishing under the Whomping Willow. They know where the real passages are, the abandoned ones, the ones the Marauder's map never bothered to label. We'll get to that later when we talk about passages that only open for certain people and what happens when the castle decides you're not invited. If portraits are the castle's gossip network, the ghosts are its VIP all-access pass. They don't just know the shortcuts, they ignore the idea of shortcuts entirely, because for them, Hogwarts is one endless, borderless space. Let's start with the basics. Nearly headless Nick doesn't walk corridors so much as politely suggests the air carry him in that general direction. You see him at the end of the Great Hall, blink, and he's halfway through a stone pillar like it's slightly inconvenient fog. The Bloody Baron is worse. That man has weaponized silence. One second the Slytherin common room is empty. The next he's hovering near the ceiling, bloodstains glinting, having just drifted straight through the lake-facing wall like gravity was a rumor. And then there's Peeves, the chaotic exception. Peeves doesn't glide. He pops, mid-air, mid-prank, mid-filch meltdown. You're trudging up the staircase thinking about homework, and suddenly he explodes out of a suit of armor that nobody has seen move in 50 years, apparently having phased in from some angle that only poltergeists and cursed rubber chickens understand. For ghosts, every wall is a door. Every floor is optional. They treat locked classrooms, sealed corridors, and do not enter signs, the way Fred and George treated school rules, as suggestions at best. While students are stuck with moving staircases, trick steps, and the occasional homicidal tapestry, the dead just drift straight through, stitching the whole castle together in one continuous three-dimensional route only they ever really experience. If you're wondering how students deal with this, the answer is badly, but creatively. Following a ghost is one of the oldest Hogwarts traditions nobody writes down. You see Nick vanish through a wall near the library and think, all right, secret passage. You push through the nearest door, squeeze behind a bookshelf, and maybe you do find a hidden side room or a shortcut stair that drops you 2 floors closer to Charms. But you never quite end up where he went. It's like having half the Marauder's map, drawn by someone who forgot what doors are. Those half maps live in students' heads. If you duck left after the third window where the Grey Lady disappeared that one time, you can shave 5 minutes off getting to Transfiguration. It's all rumor, memory, and ghost watching, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly how Hogwarts likes it. Helpful enough to be tempting, confusing enough to stay mysterious. Emotionally, the ghosts are walking, talking patch notes for the castle. They've watched passages get carved out in the Founders' era, bricked up in some long-forgotten security panic, then quietly reopened during the Marauders' reign of chaos. The Bloody Baron has literally seen the Whomping Willow passage go from brand new Lupin safety tunnel to do not ask questions. The Grey Lady has floated through the Room of Requirement back when it was probably storing medieval chamber pots. They carry centuries of architectural memory, together with every bad decision Hogwarts has ever made about secret doors. And here's the part that keeps fans up at night. One of the Marauders' maps unlabeled tunnels, the ones nobody ever explains. There's a theory that it started with a ghost. Picture it. Young James and Sirius spot a translucent figure vanish into a wall near the kitchens, take the long way around, and actually find a passage that, for one wild night, links Hogwarts to some forgotten cellar in Hogsmeade. They map what they can, brag about it for weeks, and then the castle quietly shifts. The route never opens the same way again. Did they misremember? Did the castle move? Or did they accidentally follow something even older than a ghost? Yeah, take a moment, because the next passage we're about to talk about doesn't care about staircases, doors, or even being on the same floor. The map doesn't care about floors, it cares about exits. Let's start with the one solid thing we actually know. The Marauders map labels 7 secret passages leading out of Hogwarts, not 7 shortcuts to Charms class. 7 ways to leave the castle without using a single main door like a normal, rule-abiding student. Out of those 7, we only get descriptions for a handful. Honeydukes, the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack, the One-Eyed Witch Hump, and then dotted lines that just stop. Anonymous, teasing you from the edge of the parchment. If you're wondering, no, you didn't miss a chapter. The books never tell us where at least 2 of those routes go. What we do get are constraints. They have to lead outside the castle grounds, or at least to the boundary walls. They were usable when the Marauders drew the map, which, if you've been paying attention, means 1970s Hogwarts engineering. And by Harry's 3rd year, at least 1 is labeled as caved in or unsafe. So somewhere between prank Golden Age and Gryffindor Chaos era, Hogwarts literally shut a door on them. So where did they go? Let's build this calmly, piece by piece, like you're tracing the ink with your fingertip, in the quiet of the common room. One very grounded theory, an older, now abandoned Hogsmeade building. Honeydukes gets the famous tunnel, but that can't have been the only shop smuggling students and sweets back and forth. Imagine a narrow passage that used to end in the cellar of a tiny pub that closed before Harry was born. Shelves still up, dust thick on the bottles, a few rusted hooks where someone once hung cloaks during secret dates. After the pub shut down, the magical connection weakens, the tunnel starts to crumble, and by the time Fred and George are checking the map, it's already marked as caved in. Another candidate sits practically waving its branches at us, the Hill of the Shrieking Shack. We know one official tunnel connects the Willow to the shack, built for Lupin, but the shack is older than that cover story. What if a second, rougher tunnel peels away underground and surfaces closer to the edge of the forbidden forest? Not for a werewolf, for students who wanted the fastest, dumbest route to the most off-limits trees in Britain. Look, nobody was surprised that Hogwarts kids kept trying to reach the forest. The castle probably responded by letting one of those routes quietly collapse. All of this is speculation, and that's the fun part. You're not rewriting canon, you're walking through the gaps it leaves. Picture a half-collapsed corridor, low ceiling, roots breaking through the stone, your wand light catching old boot prints, and a single abandoned Zonko's bag. Every loose stone feels like it remembers a different set of footsteps. For now, let's celebrate that the map doesn't give you everything, it leaves you space. So pick one of those unnamed dotted lines and design it in your head. Decide where it starts, where it surfaces, and who used it first. Because next we're going to slow down, pick one of these missing tunnels, and actually walk it together like it's a real, remembered journey. So, you pick one, that faint, almost embarrassed dotted line on the Marauder's map, the one that barely shows up unless you tilt it toward the candlelight. Next to it, in spidery handwriting that definitely isn't official Hogwarts cartography, someone's written two words, caved in. If you're wondering, that's not a warning, that's an invitation. Let's start with where it begins, a quiet corridor you never have a reason to use, 2 floors above the Great Hall, where the portraits nap all afternoon and the air always smells faintly of stone and dust. On your borrowed map, the line starts behind a statue you've walked past 100 times without really seeing. Some long forgotten witch, robes chipped, wand snapped off at the tip, watching nobody in particular. You stand in front of her and just wait. The castle hums around you. Far off clatter from the kitchens, a distant laugh from the courtyard, the soft rumble of moving staircases doing whatever chaotic nonsense they do. Then you notice it. One flagstone with a thinner coat of dust, like someone brushed past it decades ago and the castle never quite forgot. You press. The stone shifts, not dramatically, just enough. The statue grinds sideways with the exhausted sigh of something that has been ignored since before your grandparents were born. A crack opens, just wide enough for a stubborn student with bad ideas and good timing. You slip through, shoulders scraping, and for a second you're sure you'll get stuck and have to explain this to McGonagall. You don't. You drop into the dark. The tunnel smells like old earth and colder years. Your wand light spills over a low ceiling, rough-hewn walls, roots poking through like the fingers of the forbidden forest, reaching down to check who's visiting. Water drips somewhere ahead in a slow, patient rhythm. You walk, carefully. The floor is uneven, the air cooler with every step, and the sound of the castle fades until you can only hear your own breathing and that one stubborn drip. Sometimes the ceiling dips and you have to duck. Sometimes the walls pinch in and you turn sideways, shuffling, feeling the rock brush your robes. Above you, muffled and distant, comes a whoosh like a giant exhaling. The black lake, you realize, moving against the shore, or wind dragging itself across the grounds. Hard to say. The wizarding world doesn't label its sound effects. After a while, the tunnel narrows into a choke point of stone. The map wasn't lying. The cave-in is real. Rocks, dirt, the collapsed ribs of the passage stacked almost to the ceiling. But at the very top, just where your wand light almost gives up, there's a gap. Moonlight, thin as a promise, silvering the edges of the stones. You climb carefully, fingers cold, and press your eye to the opening. Outside, framed in that tiny slice of night, you can just make out the jagged outline of rooftops. Hogsmeade, blurred and distant. Beyond that, the suggestion of trees, the forbidden forest, turned into a charcoal sketch. And here's the pattern. Interrupt your inner Gryffindor was not prepared for. You don't blast the rocks away. You don't try to force it open or mark it on a new map or turn it into your personal shortcut to Zonko's. You sit down, right there in the half light back against the cool wall, wand lowered so the moon has room to breathe. You listen to the drip, to the lake or the wind pretending to be each other, to the quiet heartbeat of a school that survived a war and still keeps its secrets. For now, let's celebrate that this tunnel doesn't need to go anywhere. It's not a mission. It's a room-sized pause button carved under Hogwarts. You ended up in a place nobody has touched in decades, and instead of conquering it, you just exist. Yeah, take a moment. Because later, when you climb back out and the statue slides shut behind you, the corridor will look exactly the same. But you won't. And if you're wondering what other passages are waiting like that, sealed but listening, we'll get to that later. So, when you crawl back out of one of those sealed corridors blinking in the torchlight, the obvious question hits you. Why do these things exist at all? Who wakes up and says, you know what this cursed murder castle needs? More hidden tunnels? Let's start with the softest answer. Love, not the swoony, Yule Ball kind. The messy, protective, I will literally re-landscape the grounds for you kind. Dumbledore ordering a tunnel from the castle to the shrieking shack so Remus Lupin could transform safely is one of the most quietly romantic engineering projects in the wizarding world. He plants a homicidal tree on top, arms Pumphrey with a stick, and suddenly a werewolf has a commute that doesn't end with him eating his classmates. It's care, weaponized as architecture. Fast forward to the Caro era, and that same instinct mutates into resistance. The room of requirement punching a passage straight into the hog's head so Dumbledore's army can sneak food, news, and new recruits. That's Hogwarts itself joining the rebellion. Neville and the DA are literally living in a secret hallway, kept alive by an enchanted room that keeps saying, you need safety? Okay, try this exit. Love again, just in a grungier, we haven't showered in a week edition. Then you've got smuggling. The one-eyed witch hump down to Honeydukes is not about grand ideals, it's about sugar. It's about third years deciding that if the adults won't let them go to Hogsmeade, they'll go anyway and come back with enough chocolate frogs to trigger a medical alert. Honeydukes, by the way, is absolutely complicit. You don't have a random trapdoor in your cellar and never ask where it goes. That passage turns Hogwarts into a black market economy of sweets, joke products, and probably at least 3 banned fireworks. During the war, that same smuggler logic scales up. If you're wondering how food, messages, and the occasional fugitive end up slipping in and out while Death Eaters are watching the front gates, it's the Honeydukes route, the Hog's Head passage, all those unofficial arteries doing quiet work. Greed, survival, convenience, they all share the same blueprint. And then, monsters. Salazar Slytherin builds the Chamber of Secrets, which, if you've been paying attention, is basically a basilisk highway with a statue attached. This is paranoia poured into stone, a whole hidden plumbing system, just so his murder snake can commute efficiently between classes. The Shrieking Shack starts as a love project for Lupin, but to the outside world it becomes a monster story too, wrapped in howls and smashed furniture. Same idea. Hide the dangerous thing. Completely different emotional core. Look, nobody was surprised that the exact same architectural trick can be an act of care, greed, or cruelty. Hogwarts just keeps them all. The compassionate tunnel, the candy pipeline, the hate-filled snake corridor. The people who ordered them are dead, retired, or teaching herbology. But the stone remembers, and new kids keep repurposing the roots for whatever disaster their year is serving. By the time Harry's children arrive, the original motives are basically trivia night answers. The tunnels are folklore now, waiting for the next set of Weasleys to weaponize them for midnight snacks, secret meetings, or something stranger. And if you think they only use the old passages and the castle isn't quietly growing new ones for them, you might want to stick around for what happens next. So what does next set of Weasleys actually look like when the castle isn't actively on fire? It looks like a Hogwarts where Voldemort is a test question, not a current event, and the biggest crisis most nights is whether you finished your potions essay before your broom tryouts. The war is a story your parents tell. Your reality is homework, Quidditch, and trying not to get caught snogging behind the greenhouses. Into that world walk Albus Severus Potter, Rose Granger Weasley, and Scorpius Malfoy. The Anxiety Trio. The kids who grew up with bedtime stories that started, "So when we were hiding in a tent." If you're wondering, yes, they absolutely know the castle has tunnels. They've heard about the one-eyed witch, the Whomping Willow, the Room of Requirement, all of it. And at some point, Harry and Ron finally hand over the Marauder's map like it's a cursed family heirloom, which, if you've been paying attention, it kind of is. Let's start with the Honeyduke's run because obviously the first thing you do with a legendary magical artifact is use it for snacks. One quiet Friday, Albus and Scorpius are staring at an empty stash of chocolate frogs and a transfiguration essay they're absolutely not doing. Rose, who was born responsible, is pretending she's above this while already putting on her cloak. They sneak out, tap the map, watch tiny ink footprints move, and find the old one-eyed witch hump that once delivered Harry straight into Honeyduke's cellar. Only now it's different. The statue still opens, the tunnel still runs under the village, but the floor is smoother, the roots have shifted, and someone has definitely carved T. L was here, 1998, into the wall. They're not dodging Death Eaters, they're arguing about which sweets to bring back for Lily and whether McGonagall secretly knows and just doesn't care as long as nobody dies. Low stakes, high sugar. The same passage, completely different weight. Another night, they ask the Room of Requirement for a secret way to the lake where no one will bother us. The room thinks about it, shrugs in castle, and opens onto a narrow, spiraling stair that absolutely did not exist in the Marauder's day. It ends at a tiny stone balcony half hidden in ivy, just above the Black Lake, where you can hear the water slap the rocks and see the squid drifting under the surface like a lazy guardian. They sit there trading stories, Rose repeating bits of Hermione's tales about hiding DA members, Albus admitting he's terrified of not living up to a name that contains two headmasters and one walking trauma magnet. Scorpius quietly confessing that his dad still flinches at certain dates in the calendar. For them, these tunnels aren't escape routes, they're family albums carved into stone and dirt. They're proof the school survived, their parents survived, and now Hogwarts is finally allowed to just be a school again. For now, let's celebrate the calm, but don't get too comfortable, because while the kids are retracing old paths, the castle is busy rearranging itself, quietly sliding staircases and nudging walls, adding a few new secrets to keep the boredom at bay. And one of those new passages? Yeah, take a moment, we'll get to that later. So, what happens when a semi-sentient castle has to rebuild itself after a magical war? You don't just slap some plaster on the walls and call it a day. At Hogwarts, reconstruction is basically an excuse for the building to hit shuffle on its own floor plan. Let's start with the obvious. The damage wasn't just physical. Entire corridors were blasted open, towers cracked, staircases collapsed. In those heavily hit zones, the old enchantments got scrambled, stretched, and stitched back together, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly when Hogwarts likes to get creative. The stones remember how to be a wall, they also remember how to be a door. Sometimes they change their mind, so a corridor that used to be a dead end during Harry's time, after the war, that same stretch might quietly grow a secret. A previously solid wall in a rebuilt hallway now hides a narrow stair that curls up to a tiny tower room with one window and the best sunrise view in Scotland. No plaque, no password, just a soft tingle in the air if you walk past it while you're sad enough, or brave enough, to try leaning on the stone. Downstairs, it's the same story. A new tapestry goes up to cover some cracked stones, and apparently Hogwarts takes that as an invitation. Behind the woven dragons and goblins, a spiral passage burrows down toward the smell of bread and sugar, ending up just outside the kitchens. Not quite as dramatic as the Honeyduke's tunnel, but for a stressed Ravenclaw at exam time, it's basically a sacred pilgrimage route. And if you're wondering whether the staff just lets the castle freestyle like this, not exactly. McGonagall and the board are not trying to relive students in mortal peril as an extracurricular. After the battle, they actually approve a few official hidden routes, protected emergency corridors that bypass bottlenecks, reinforced stairwells that connect dormitories to the grounds, that kind of thing. Sensible, practical, very McGonagall, but Hogwarts hears secret emergency passage and goes, cool, I'll make it weird. The straight, well-lit corridor they design, the castle quietly adds a bend, a trick step, maybe a side door that only opens if three people walk through together. It's like the building can't resist adding a little mischief to the safety briefing. and hanging over all of this is the Room of Requirement's wartime stunt. During the Caro era, that room didn't just change shape, it generated exits, food, full on survival infrastructure. That level of adaptive magic leaves a kind of template in the castle's wiring. After the war, it's easier for new responsive spaces to pop up. A broom cupboard that stretches into a study nook during OWLEs, a storage room that becomes a temporary sick bay during a Quidditch disaster. Pattern interrupt time. What if Hogwarts isn't always trying to hide these places? Sometimes it does the opposite. A staircase shifts just when a homesick first year is about to cry, delivering them to a quiet balcony instead of transfiguration. A portrait suddenly remembers a shortcut when two kids are walking side by side for the first time, not quite holding hands yet. The castle nudges, redirects, offers an escape hatch or a moment of peace, like a very old, very nosy friend. And one of those gentle nudges, it leads somewhere nobody had mapped before. We're talking about a passage that doesn't just move you through space, but through stories. And that one the castle saves for a very specific group of students. So let's start with that nudge. The castle has picked you apparently, and it's not sending you to bed. You're in your common room, last embers sinking into ash, armchairs slumped like they've had a rough term too. You pull an invisibility cloak over your head, unfold the Marauder's map, and whisper those four ridiculous, perfect words. The room fades behind you. The corridors open up. You slide out through the portrait hole, or the barrel entrance, or the stone door that pretends it's never seen you before. The castle is midnight quiet. Just your footsteps, muffled, and the tiny scratch of ink as the map updates. One staircase up, two down. You dodge the vanishing step you learned about the hard way in second year because you only let a staircase eat you once. Micro passages first. Warm up round. You press flat as a suit of armor snores, then slip behind a tapestry that ripples like water and hides a skinny shortcut between corridors. A portrait of a drowsy wizard cracks one eye open, clearly sees a floating bit of parchment, and decides this is above his pay grade. He shuts his eyes again. Look, nobody was surprised. If you're wondering how many of these tiny roots exist, the answer is too many and not enough. Behind statues, under staircases, through doors that only open if you walk past them complaining about homework. Hogwarts loves a dramatic entrance. Now the big ones. You duck into the familiar dip behind the one-eyed witch statue. A tap of the wand, a whispered password, and you're dropping into the Honeyduke's passage. It smells like dust, stone, and very old sugar, like every chocolate frog wrapper Harry and Ron ever abandoned down here. The tunnel slopes, twists, and finally ends up in the dark underbelly of the sweetest shop in Hogsmeade. You don't climb out. Not tonight. You just stand there, imagining shelves creaking above you with fizzing whiz-bees and exploding bonbons, and every kid who ever risked detention for a sugar quill. Backtrack. Different memory, different danger. The Whomping Willow tunnel waits out on the grounds, roots clawing the entrance. You squeeze into the narrow passage and feel the air change. Colder, older. You can almost hear the echo of Lupin's footsteps, fast and desperate, racing the moon. This whole route was built for one boy's curse, which, if you've been paying attention, is peak Hogwarts. Hide the monster, love the child. You surface again inside, higher now, and let the map pull you toward a door that doesn't exist until you need it. The room of requirement yawns open, and for a second you don't see shelves or piles or junk. You see hammocks, stolen food, Neville's tired grin, and the DA laughing too loudly because they're trying not to be terrified. One of its exits once opens straight into the Hog's head. Tonight the room just offers a quiet corridor out, like it remembers you've had enough battles for one lifetime. You drift past the bathroom where the Chamber of Secrets waits under cracked tiles and Myrtle's endless commentary. You pause, of course you do. The sink gleams faintly. You know the word that opens it. You don't say it. Not every secret passage is meant for midnight sightseeing. Instead, you let the castle tilt you upward into a narrow, hidden stair that squeezes between walls, higher, tighter, until you spill out onto a tiny balcony folded into one of the towers. The lake is a sheet of black glass. Hogsmeade is a scatter of sleepy lights. Yeah, take a moment. You could go back. You don't. One more corridor, one more turn you've never noticed even after years of maps and mischief. At the very end waits a door with no portrait, no label, no password you've ever heard. The handle is cool under your fingers. The map is blank where it should be. You don't open it. For now, let's celebrate the fact that even the marauders didn't know everything, because whatever's behind that door, the castle is saving it for you, and we'll get to that later. So here's the emotional punchline hiding under all the stone and dust. Hogwarts' secret passages are basically the castle's diary. Every tunnel is the school taking sides. Every hidden door is a little vote for who deserves to get through. Let's start with the most brutal contrast. Under one tree, you've got Remus Lupin's tunnel, a passage dug into the roots of a violent, thrashing monster tree so a scared kid wouldn't hurt anyone. Dumbledore bends the grounds, the willow, the shrieking shack itself around one boy's safety and dignity in a prejudiced wizarding world. Same earth, different intention. Because a little deeper along that hillside, Salazar Slytherin leaves his own legacy, the Chamber of Secrets, a murder basement for a giant snake, built to purge the unworthy. One tunnel is an act of kindness, the other is an act of cruelty. Same dirt, completely different hearts. And if you're wondering who really owned Hogwarts in the end, it was not the guy calling himself Lord of it. Voldemort tried to control everything from the curriculum to who could breathe in the corridors, but he never actually mastered the castle's secrets. The Room of Requirement literally opened a private railway for Dumbledore's army while he was busy giving speeches. Neville and the DA were slipping in and out through the Hogshead Passage, raiding the kitchens, keeping hope alive, while the Carrows thought locking doors counted as strategy. Which, if you've been paying attention, is peak Voldemort, obsessed with prophecy and wands and bloodlines, outplayed by a sentient hallway. Character growth, the secret passages keep the receipts. Neville goes from the boy who couldn't find his way back from the common room to the de facto master of the back ways. He's the one who knows which stretch of wall will open, which staircase will cooperate, which tunnel can smuggle first years out from under Death Eater noses. Harry's arc does the same thing. First, he's sneaking down to Honeydukes for sweets with the Marauder's map. Cute, harmless. Then those same instincts turn into him leading people through life-saving routes, out of the Room of Requirement, into the Battle of Hogwarts, through the castle like he's been rehearsing for this since third year. And justice? The walls are petty in the best way. Dolores Umbridge tried to clamp down on student freedom with educational decrees, chains, and a terrifying love of clipboards. She turns Hogwarts into a surveillance state, and the castle responds by literally growing new secret doors behind her back. The DA meets in the Room of Requirement. The corridors whisper around her. Her whole regime gets outlived by a building that prefers graffiti and hidden cupboards to her discipline. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Yeah, take a moment, because the real magic trick is where this all ends up. The same corridors that once held werewolves, basilisks, and Death Eaters will, eventually, just be quiet, domestic paths. Secret walks to Hogsmeade dates, midnight snack runs, kids daring each other to find the next hidden door. After everything, the castle is slowly shifting from trauma-filled tunnels to something almost cozy. And in the final stretch, we're going to zoom all the way out and watch that transformation happen, passage by passage, era by era, until Hogwarts' hidden ways feel less like battlegrounds and more like home. From trauma maze to home, Hogwarts learns to breathe again. Let's start with the emotional whiplash. Early series Hogwarts secret passages are basically a theme park for chaos. Honeyduke's Tunnel, Candy Heist, One-Eyed Witch Hump, Hogsmeade dates and joke shop runs. The Marauder's map is less a safety tool and more a how to break every rule in under 10 minutes guide. The worst thing that usually happens is Filch confiscates a fanged frisbee and writes a strongly worded rant about it. Then the war hits, and the exact same stone, the same doors, the same trick steps turn into a survival network. That Honeyduke's passage Harry used for sweets? Later, kids use it to sneak food in when the Carrows are starving out Dumbledore's army. The Room of Requirement exit to the Hogshead, which, if you've been paying attention, started as a convenient back door, becomes an actual lifeline funneling in allies and smuggling out the injured while Snape is technically in charge. The castle doesn't move. People do. Intentions flip. What used to be a shortcut to Zonko's becomes the difference between getting caught and getting to the next meeting alive. Neville and the DA literally end up living inside the Room of Requirement, mapping exits, counting steps, turning Hogwarts into this underground resistance maze. Same corridors, completely different story. After the battle, that story doesn't reset overnight. You don't just scrub off scorch marks and say, cool, trauma solved. For a while, every shadowy stretch of hallway is doing double duty. Part nostalgia, part horror flashback. You get first years whispering, this is where they hid from the Carrows, while a seventh year walks the same path because it's the only place they can cry without freaking out their roommates. And slowly the usage shifts again. That Honeyduke's tunnel goes back to midnight snacks and sugar quills, but now there's this quiet reverence baked into the mischief. Students take the room of requirement passage to the Hog's Head to sneak out for butterbeer and gossip, not to dodge torture. The same staircases that once led you to a secret DA meeting now lead you to a stolen kiss, or a late night study group cramming for NEWTs with contraband chocolate frogs. Look, nobody was surprised that Voldemort didn't get a cozy epilogue out of this. His soul is shredded, stuck in a kind of supernatural waiting room with no exit, while the castle he tried to dominate is out here hosting secret birthday parties in unused classrooms he never even found. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. He wanted Hogwarts as a fortress. It ended up as a home he never understood. Pattern interrupt for your brain. If you reread the series now and imagine every corridor with its full past and future layered over it, Hogwarts stops being just a backdrop. Those hidden roots become scar tissue and fresh growth at the same time. You're not just watching kids run to class, you're watching a building heal in real time. And we're not done. Because when you follow those passages era by era, you start to see which secrets the castle keeps and which ones it quietly opens up for the next generation. And that's where you come in, because at this point we've basically toured every flavor of chaos Hogwarts can hide in a wall. Tunnels for sweets, for monsters, for love, for war, and for pure, unfiltered mischief. You've got the Honeyduke's Run, which is literally a sugar pipeline. The Whomping Willow route, custom built to escort one very bitey prefect to his monthly werewolf retreat. The room of requirement exits that turned into a resistance supply chain during the Carrows year. If you're wondering, yes, Hogwarts basically speed ran secret tunnel for every mood. So now it's your turn in the maze. If you could add one more passage to this castle, what would you build? Where would it start? Where would it end? And what would it actually be for? Midnight snacks, secret dates, smuggling illegal puffs kinds because you rescued them from zonkos? Let's start with some prompts. Picture a hidden greenhouse under the Black Lake, all blue-green light and drifting weeds above your head, where Neville quietly teaches the handful of students who actually do their herbology reading. The only way in? A trapdoor disguised as a cracked flagstone in the boathouse, which, if you've been paying attention, is exactly the kind of place Hogwarts loves to pretend is boring until it isn't. Or maybe you want a silent library annex? No squeaky chairs, no Madam Pince breathing down your neck like a disappointed Dementor. Just a narrow tunnel behind a portrait of a very offended wizard who hates noise, opening into a low, circular room lined with banned or misplaced books. The kind of place Hermione would pretend not to know about, while absolutely having a color-coded map. Or, go big, a tunnel that winds up to a tiny cliffside ledge above the grounds, just wide enough for a blanket, a telescope, and two people who should absolutely be sleeping. A stargazing spot where you can see the whole castle lit up, hear the lake, and pretend your transfiguration essay is not due in 7 hours. That ledge would end up in every Hogwarts love story fanfic by Tuesday. Look, nobody was surprised when the Marauders map turned out to be incomplete. The fandom basically took one look at those blank spaces and said, cool, that's for us. Fan-created passages are how the wizarding world keeps Hogwarts alive after the last page, filling in the gaps James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter never got around to charting. So drop your passage idea in the comments, name it. Tell us who built it, when, and why. For now, let's celebrate the fact that this castle is still growing every time someone imagines a new way through it. And who knows? Some of the best ideas might quietly show up in a future Calm Story compilation, tucked between the canon tunnels and the almost canon ones, because we're about to dive into a few more Hogwarts deep cuts that already feel like fan inventions, until you realize they were there all along. So by now, you've basically done what Filch always suspected you were doing. You've walked the castle inside out, From that first step under the one-eyed witch, slipping into the Honeyduke's tunnel like an honorary marauder, to the last imaginary door you didn't quite open, you've traced the hidden skeleton of Hogwarts. Every shortcut, every trick stair, every portrait that pretends not to notice you passing through its frame, together they make this quiet, underground outline of the school. On the surface, you've got classes, house points, and exams you definitely didn't revise for. Underneath, you've got this secret nervous system of stone and shadow, quietly firing every time a student decides they're not taking the normal route today. Look, nobody was surprised that the books treated secret passages like convenient plot devices. Oh no, we're trapped. Are you? Or is there a conveniently placed statue with a password and a questionable health and safety rating? But if you've been paying attention, the castle is doing something weirder. It's breathing. It adapts. It remembers. The Whomping Willow passage still carries the echo of a scared boy named Remus, trying to get to the shrieking shack before he hurts anyone. The room of requirement exits still feel like Neville and the DA are about to burst out, grabbing bread rolls and resistance leaflets in the same trip. Even when we imagine new routes, they end up draped in old footsteps. That's the core of it. The secret passages are how Hogwarts stores people, not their grades, their choices. And if you're wondering where we go after mapping all of that, don't worry, the castle has layers left. We're going to get into every common room entrance, every password, every time a portrait or a pile of rocks quietly decided who counts as worthy. We'll get to that later. For now, let's celebrate the fact that the building itself has stronger opinions than half the ministry. We'll wander through the rules that decide who gets into Gryffindor Tower, the enchantments that slam shut when the wrong person even breathes near the kitchens, and every moment Hogwarts basically picked a side in the story. The moving staircases don't just move for fun. Sometimes they're doing crowd control. But before you sprint off to the next deep dive, you're allowed to linger here for a second. Yeah. Take a moment. Let your brain pick one passage, maybe the tunnel under the lake, or that invisible door you invented between the library and your house common room, and walk it again in your head. Let the torches burn low. Let the floor be cold. Let the rest of your real-world to-do list wait while you trail your fingers along the stone. If wandering Hogwarts like this actually made your shoulders drop half an inch, subscribing is basically carving your own new secret passage from your home screen straight back to the castle. No password, no prefect, no filch. Just you, the next hidden system we uncover, and a school that apparently never runs out of doors. So, if your home screen is now hiding a secret doorway to Hogwarts, think of this channel as your own personal Marauder's map. Every time you subscribe, you're basically tucking that map into your pocket, ready to unfold whenever you need to duck out of the real world and back into moving staircases, trick doors, and wildly unsafe architecture that would give any Muggle inspector a heart attack. Let's start with what that actually means. Subscribing isn't just supporting the channel. It's you claiming a reusable secret passage. One tap and you're back in a calm walkthrough of the castle, deep diving how the room of requirement ended up moonlighting as a refugee camp, or quietly tracing the tunnel from the one-eyed witch hump to the Honeyduke's cellar like you're planning the world's coziest candy heist. And if you're wondering where the map gets its new corridors from, it's you. The comments are literally how this thing keeps expanding. Drop the secret passage you wish existed. A hidden stair straight from the library to the kitchens, a tunnel from Gryffindor Tower to the Black Lake, a door in McGonagall's office that just ejects you into Hogsmeade on Hogsmeade weekends. Or tell me your favorite canon tunnel, or the route you'd abuse the most if you were a student trying to avoid Filch and your Transfiguration essay at the same time. Look, nobody was surprised that the original Marauders filled their map with chaos, but our version can be a little softer, a map of quiet routes, nighttime walks, the way you'd sneak from the common room to the astronomy tower just to watch the sunrise over the Forbidden Forest after the war, when the castle is healing and you don't have to listen for Death Eaters in the corridors anymore. Likes and shares, think of those as tiny Lumos charms you're casting in the hallway. Every time you hit like, you're basically lifting your wand and saying, yeah, this corner of the wizarding world is safe. Other fans can find their way here. Share it with the one friend who still has their childhood paperbacks, spine cracked and taped together, because that's how you quietly open another door for them too. For now, let's celebrate that you've already made it this far into the castle with me. If you want the next corridor to follow, picture slipping through a portrait and into a calm walkthrough of every common room entrance, or wandering with us through a day at Hogwarts after the war, when the secret passages are still there, but the reasons you use them have changed. And when you're ready to step away, we'll do what the Marauders always did. Fold the map, smooth the parchment, whisper very softly, "Mischief's managed." The ink fades, the corridors vanish, and your screen goes dark. But the castle, it'll still be here, full of hidden roots and quiet stories, waiting for you to open the map again. But before we let the castle go completely quiet, let's do one last run. Not a chase, not a sprint, just a slow Honeyduke's walk you can keep in your back pocket for later. Let's start with the one-eyed witch. You're not rushing to make a Quidditch match or dodge Filch. You're already in your pajamas mentally, even if you're technically still in your robes. You tap the hump, whisper the password, and instead of chaos, what you get is distance. The castle sounds fall away like someone's turning down a wireless. You swing your legs into the tunnel. The stone lip is cool under your palms. You feel for the floor with your toes, find packed earth and old dust, and drop down with the softest thud. The passage smells like stone and history and the faintest ghost of sugar that drifted down from Honeydukes over decades. When you start walking, your footsteps make this tiny crunch, like biting into the edge of a chocolate frog card. It's dark, but not scary dark, more like blanket over your head dark. Every so often you hear the castle plumbing rumble somewhere far above, that weird, distant whoosh that makes you imagine pipes like secret rivers. If you're wondering, yes, Hogwarts probably has more personality in its plumbing than most ministry officials. You trail your fingers along the wall, feeling the stone go from rough to unexpectedly smooth, where thousands of hands did the exact same thing. Time stretches, the tunnel bends. Your pace slows until it's basically a bedtime story you're walking through. No deadlines, no exams, just the sound of your own breathing, the gentle scuff of your shoes, and the comforting knowledge that this path has ended up safe every single time Harry took it, which, if you've been paying attention, is not a guarantee for any other route he ever chose. Finally, the air changes. Warmer, sweeter. You reach the trap door and push it up a crack. Honeydukes' cellar breathes out at you. Cool stone floor, wooden crates stacked in slightly chaotic rows, the soft shimmer of sugar dust hanging in the air like glitter that made better life choices. Above you, muffled laughter, the thump of feet, the clink of jars. You're hidden, but not alone. Perfect. You climb out, careful, like you're stepping into a shared secret. In the dim light, you can actually see sugar on the crates, a fine, sparkly layer on labels that say things like fizzing whiz-bees and chocoballs. And here's the twist. You don't just grab and go. You take a couple of sickles from your pocket and leave them on a crate. Payment, tribute, a tiny, weirdly honorable ritual that turns mischief into a private agreement between you and the shop. For now, let's celebrate the fact that in this version, nothing goes wrong. You pick a bar of chocolate, unwrap it slowly, let a square melt on your tongue until the edges blur and the cellar feels even softer around you. Then you slip back through the trapdoor, pull it closed, and start the return journey. Back up the tunnel, the sugar air fades, and the castle seeps in again. Cooler now. You can practically taste the temperature shift on your cheeks. By the time you're climbing out behind the witch, the stones feel familiar under your hands, like the castle is saying, "Oh, it's you again." The corridors are quieter. Portraits snore. A suit of armor mutters in its sleep about trolls. You pad back to your dormitory, chocolate still on your tongue, the memory of sugar and stone braided together. You slide into bed, pull the curtains, and let the last bit of sweetness dissolve while the castle hums around you. Pattern interrupt for your actual life. You can run this Honeydukes walk anytime. Stuck on a train, can't sleep, brain doing a full Death Eater meeting at 2 a.m.? Drop into the tunnel, feel the stone, hear the distant pipes, emerge into the sugar-dusted cellar, leave your imaginary sickles, and walk back to bed in your head. It's a secret passage you carry with you, a tiny, portable Hogwarts you can open and close without a map. And if you're wondering whether Hogwarts has more calm routes like that tucked away, don't worry. We'll get to that later, because the castle isn't done sharing. From portable Honeydukes to something a lot quieter. Let's start with the tree that used to try to commit murder every time a third year got too close. The whomping willow is still there after the war, if you're wondering. Older, a little lopsided, branches heavier, like it finally got tired of throwing punches at teenagers. It still twitches if anyone gets clever, but that wild, flailing rage, mostly gone. The famous knot on the trunk is still there too, just waiting, but almost nobody presses it now. It ended up like an emergency exit in a building that doesn't catch fire anymore. Tonight you do, in your head anyway. You wait until the grounds are dark and the castle windows are a scatter of sleepy candlelight. You cross the grass, not sprinting like Harry with a broken leg, not ducking spells, just walking. Because the war is over and this isn't a rescue mission, it's a visit. You spot the knot, imagined or remembered, and touch it. The branches go still with that same strange, instant obedience, which, if you've been paying attention, is very unwomping of this particular willow. The trunk shudders, the roots shift, and there it is, the opening to Lupin's tunnel, yawning like a sigh. You climb down, no panic, no ticking clock, just you and the narrow stone passage that once meant survival for a scared 11-year-old boy who turned into a monster once a month. The air is cool and smells of earth and old magic. Your footsteps echo, soft and hollow, the sound bouncing off the curved walls in a slow, steady rhythm. Tap, 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 like a heartbeat that finally calmed down. Every so often, water drips from the ceiling, that tiny, patient sound of Hogwarts slowly breathing. Somewhere far above, an owl calls, a low, distant question that filters down through roots and rock. And if you think you hear something else, a thin, far-off howl threading through the silence, that's just your imagination filling in old memories that don't belong to you but somehow still feel like they do. The tunnel slopes upward. The air changes, dustier, stiller. You reach the end and push open the door into the shrieking shack, which, without a werewolf inside, is honestly just a slightly dramatic cottage. The floorboards don't groan under claws and fury anymore, they just creak politely under your weight, like they're relieved you're only human. Moonlight cuts through the cracked windows, catching dust motes that drift and spin in slow, lazy spirals. The shredded furniture is still there, but the edges feel softened by time. No chains, no fresh gouges, no fresh blood, just old scars on wood and walls, quietly existing. Yeah, take a moment. You stand in the center of the room that once held all of Lupin's worst nights and some of his bravest choices, and you realize this passage doesn't need to be fixed or repurposed. It needs to be remembered. Some tunnels are less shortcuts and more memorials, places you walk not to change anything, but to say, I know what happened here, and I'm glad it doesn't have to happen again. When you finally turn back toward the willow and the castle lights waiting beyond it, you can't help wondering if one secret tunnel can hold this much history. What else is the castle quietly keeping for you, just out of sight, ready for the next walk? So, if the willow can hide a whole war story under its roots, what about the place that literally turned into a rebel base? Let's start with the quietest return to the loudest room Hogwarts ever made. It's years after the battle, not months, not they're still fixing the suits of armor time. Proper years. You're older, the castle's calmer, and as you walk that familiar stretch of seventh floor corridor, you pass Barnabas the Barmy's tapestry. Once, twice, 3 times. You're not thinking of the Carrows or of needing a place to disappear. You're thinking, very specifically, I want a place to remember and feel safe, the kind of wish you never had time for during the war. The door appears. Of course it does. The room remembers you. Apparently it holds grudges against Dark Lords, but not against teenagers who set off illegal fireworks in its ceiling. You step inside, already braced for the towering junk mountain of cursed diadem fame. It's gone. Instead, the room has ended up as something almost embarrassingly gentle. Shelves everywhere, book-lined walls wrapping around you like a quieter version of the library, except these are mismatched, dog-eared, clearly used books. A few hammocks still hang in the corners, ghosts of the DA days, gently swaying in a breeze that shouldn't exist. Soft rugs muffle your footsteps. There's a low table with a battered chess set and a plate that looks like it once held stolen Honeyduke's chocolate, because of course it does. If you're wondering whether the room still does impossible architecture, yeah. Take a moment. On the far side, where you absolutely do not remember a window, there's now a narrow door. When you open it, you're met with a tiny stone balcony, barely big enough for two people and a contraband butterbeer hanging high above the black lake. The air is cold, clean, and very, very alive. You can see the rebuilt Quidditch stands, the patched up towers, Hagrid's hut like a stubborn punctuation mark at the edge of the trees. But the past is still here, if you know where to look. On one wall, under a fresh coat of paint, you can make out the faintest outline of old graffiti. D.A. lives. The corner where the hammocks hang still feels like it should be full of camp beds and whispered plans. Every now and then, when the light hits just wrong, you could swear you see the impression of cots and trunks, like the room is keeping a memory overlay of the Resistance days. Gratitude is baked into the stone. The place hums with it. And the passages? Look, nobody was surprised that the wild, sprawling network from the war didn't stick around. The room is calmer now. It gives you one exit. Simple. A short, torchlit passage tucked behind a bookshelf that curves gently and spills you back into a perfectly normal corridor a few turns away from the grand staircase. No secret pub door, no underground highway. Just a reminder that if you really need it, the castle can still open a way out, which, if you've been paying attention, is kind of what this channel is trying to do. Whenever you need somewhere quiet to wander in the wizarding world, we'll keep pacing the corridor for you, asking for calm rooms, hidden balconies, and soft, story-filled corners. For now, let's celebrate that Hogwarts survived, its secrets softened, and that you can always come back here, episode by episode, whenever you need to feel safe again. So let's end where a lot of this started. A blank bit of parchment, a whispered secret, an ink that knows the castle better than anyone alive. You picture the Marauder's map in your hands again, lines glowing softly, every corridor and hidden staircase, and ridiculous little notation from four deeply unsupervised teenagers. Secret passage to Honeydukes. Tunnel under the Whomping Willow. Room of requirement exit that apparently decided to cosplay as a private flu network. The whole nervous system of Hogwarts pulsing under your fingertips. You trace one last tunnel with your thumb, like you're memorizing it. From the one-eyed witch down under the grounds, all the way to the Honeyduke's cellar where future you is absolutely stealing a chocolate frog or seven, and then you say it, quietly. Mischief managed. The ink fades, the footprints vanish, the parchment looks boring again. But your mind? Yeah, take a moment. Every path is still lit up in there, because these secret passages were never just about sneaking out for sweets or dodging Snape. They were about having a way forward when every obvious door slammed shut. Remus had the Whumping Willow tunnel so he could get to the Shrieking Shack and still belong at school. The DA used the Room of Requirement passages when the Carrows turned corridors into war zones. Harry, Ron, and Hermione kept finding new routes long after the Marauders stopped updating the map, which, if you've been paying attention, is very on brand for them. So what do you do with that when you close the video and you're not actually living inside a moving castle? You keep your own inner map. You let yourself walk, in your head, down the Hogwarts kitchen's corridor, past the ticklish pair, into the warmth and clatter. Or you step straight into the Burrow's kitchen, with the lopsided clock and a pan of something probably on fire. Or you wander Hogsmeade in winter, breath fogging, Zonko's windows glowing, Honeyduke's door jingling every time some third year makes a terrible financial decision. Those are passages too. Quiet ones, ways out of a bad day or a crowded brain or a moment that feels stuck. You're not avoiding real life. You're giving yourself a safe side corridor so you can come back to it breathing again. And if you're wondering whether you're allowed to use this channel as part of that inner map, yes, obviously. For now, let's celebrate the fact that replay buttons exist. Anytime you need to walk these tunnels again, you can reopen this video or drop into another story on the channel, like you're stepping into a fireplace, throwing down flu powder and yelling Hogwarts while your neighbors pretend they don't hear you. So picture this as we fade out. The castle at night, most windows dark, a few lit like watchful eyes. The black lake still. The forest quiet for once. Deep below, unseen, a web of tunnels and hidden stairs, humming softly with old magic and old mischief, waiting for the next pair of footsteps that needs a secret way forward. When you're ready, the map in your mind will unfold, and the castle will still be here, waiting for you to walk it.